David Copperfield. Chapter 49. I am involved in mystery. I received one morning by the post the following letter, dated Canterbury, and addressed to me at Doctors' Commons, which I read with some surprise. My dear sir, circumstances beyond my individual control have, for a considerable lapse of time, effected a severance of that intimacy which, in the limited opportunities conceded to me in the midst of my professional duties, of contemplating the scenes and events of the past, tinged by the prismatic hues of memory, has ever afforded me, as it ever must continue to afford, gratifying emotions of no common description. This fact, my dear sir, combined with the distinguished elevation to which your talents have raised you, deters me from presuming to aspire to the liberty of addressing the companion of my youth by the familiar appellation of Copperfield. It is sufficient to know that the name to which I do myself the honor to refer will ever be treasured among the muniments of our house. I allude to the archives connected with our former lodgers, preserved by Mrs. Micawber, with sentiments of personal esteem amounting to affection. It is not for one, situated, through his original errors and a fortuitous combination of unpropitious events, as is the founded bark, if he may be allowed to assume so maritime a denomination, who now takes up the pen to address you. It is not, I repeat, for one so circumstanced, to adopt the language of compliment, or of congratulation, that he leaves to abler and to purer hands. If your more important avocations should admit of your ever tracing these imperfect characters thus far, which may be, or may not be, as circumstances arise, you will naturally inquire by what object am I influenced, then, in inditing the present missive? Allow me to say that I fully defer to the reasonable character of that inquiry, and proceed to develop it, premising that it is not an object of a pecuniary nature, without more directly referring to any latent ability that may possibly exist on my part, of wielding the thunderbolt, or directing the devouring and avenging flame in any quarter. I may be permitted to observe, in passing, that my brightest visions are forever dispelled, that my peace is shattered and my power of enjoyment destroyed, that my heart is no longer in the right place, and that I no more walk erect before my fellow man. The canker is in the flower. The cup is bitter to the brim. The worm is at his work, and will soon dispose of his victim. The sooner the better. But I will not digress. Placed in a mental position of peculiar painfulness, beyond the assuaging reach even of Mrs. Micawber's influence, though exercised in the tripartite character of woman, wife, and mother, it is my intention to fly from myself for a short period, and devote a respite of 48 hours to revisiting some metropolitan scenes of past enjoyment. Among my feet will naturally tend towards the King's Bench prison. In stating that I shall be, D.V., on the outside of the south wall of that place of incarceration on civil process, the day after tomorrow, at 7 in the evening, precisely, my object in this epistolary communication is accomplished. I do not feel warranted in soliciting my former friend Mr. Copperfield, or my former friend Mr. Thomas Traddles of the Inner Temple, if that gentleman is still existent and forthcoming, to condescend to meet me, and renew, so far as may be, our past relations of the olden time. I confine myself to throwing out the observation, that, at the hour and place I have indicated, may be found such ruined vestiges as yet remain, of fallen tower, Wilkins Micawber P.S. It may be advisable to superadd to the above, the statement that Mrs. Micawber is not in confidential possession of my intentions. I read the letter over several times. Making due allowance for Mr. Micawber's lofty style of composition, and for the extraordinary relish with which he sat down and wrote long letters on all possible and impossible occasions, I still believed that something important lay hidden at the bottom of this roundabout communication. I put it down, to think about it, and took it up again, to read it once more, and was still pursuing it, when Traddles found me in the height of my judgment at a most opportune time. I have received a very singular letter, Traddles, from Mr. Micawber. No, cried Traddles. You don't say so. And I have received one from Mrs. Micawber. With that, Traddles, who was flushed with walking, and whose hair, under the combined effects of exercise and excitement, stood on end as if he saw a cheerful ghost, produced his letter and made an exchange with me. I watched him into the heart of Mr. Micawber's letter, and returned the elevation of eyebrows with which he said, wielding the thunderbolt, or directing the devouring and avenging flame. Bless me, Copperfield. And then entered on the perusal of Mrs. Micawber's epistle. It ran thus: my best regards to Mr. Thomas Traddles, and if he should still remember one who formerly had the happiness of being well acquainted with him, may I beg a few moments of his leisure time? I assure Mr. T.T. that I would not intrude upon his kindness, were I in any other position than on the confines of distraction, though harrowing to myself to mention, the alienation of Mr. Micawber, formerly so domesticated, from his wife and family, is the cause of my addressing my unhappy appeal to Mr. Traddles, and soliciting his best indulgence. Mr. T. can form no adequate idea of the change in Mr. Micawber's conduct, of his wildness, of his violence. It has gradually augmented, until it assumes does not take place. Mr. T. will not require me to depict my feelings, when I inform him that I have become accustomed to hear Mr. Micawber assert that he has sold himself to the D. Mystery and secrecy have long been his principal characteristic, have long replaced unlimited confidence. The slightest provocation, even being asked if there is anything he would prefer for dinner, causes him to express a wish for a separation. Last night, on being childishly solicited for twopence, to buy lemon stunners, a local sweetmeat, he presented an oyster knife at the twins. I entreat Mr. Traddles to bear with me in entering into these details. Without them, Mr. T. would indeed find it difficult to form the faintest conception of my heartrending situation. May I now venture to confide to Mr. T. the purport of my letter? Will he now allow me to throw myself on his friendly consideration? Oh yes, for I know his heart. The quick eye of affection is not easily blinded, when of the female sex. Mr. Micawber is going to London. Though he studiously concealed his hand, this morning before breakfast, in writing the direction card which he attached to the little brown valise of happier days, the eagle glance of matrimonial anxiety detected, D.O.N. distinctly traced. The West End destination of the coach is the Golden Cross. Dare I fervently implore Mr. T. to see my misguided husband, and to reason with him? Dare I ask Mr. T. to endeavour to step in between Mr. Micawber and his Agona? Oh no, for that would be too much. If Mr. Copperfield should yet remember one unknown to fame, will Mr. T. take charge of my unalterable regards and similar entreaties? In any case, he will have the benevolence to consider this communication strictly private, and on no account whatever to be alluded to, however distantly, in the presence of Mr. Micawber. If Mr. T. should ever reply to it, which I cannot but feel to be most improbable, a letter addressed to M.E., Post Office, Canterbury, will be fraught with less painful consequences than any addressed immediately to one, who subscribes herself, in extreme distress, Mr. Thomas Traddles's respectful friend and suppliant, Emma Micawber. "What do you think of that letter?" said Traddles, casting his eyes upon me, when I had read it twice. "What do you think of the other?" said I. For he was still reading it with knitted brows. "I think that the two together, Copperfield," replied Traddles, "mean more than Mr. and Mrs. Micawber usually mean in their correspondence, but I don't know what. They are both written in good faith, I have no doubt, and without any collusion. Poor thing!" He was now alluding to Mrs. Micawber's letter, and we were standing side by side comparing the two. "It will be a charity to write to her, at all events, and tell her that we will not fail to see Mr. Micawber." I acceded to this the more readily, because I now reproached myself with having treated her former letter rather lightly. It had set me thinking. A good deal at the time, as I have mentioned in its place, but my absorption in my own affairs, my experience of the family, and my hearing nothing more, had gradually ended in my dismissing the subject. I had often thought of the Micawbers, but chiefly to wonder what pecuniary liabilities they were establishing in Canterbury, and to recall how shy Mr. Micawber was of me when he became clerk to Uriah Heep. However, I now wrote a comforting letter to Mrs. Micawber, in our joint names, and we both signed it. As we walked into town to post it, Traddles and I held a long conference, and launched into a number of speculations, which I need not repeat. We took my aunt into our counsels in the afternoon, but our only decided conclusion was that we would be very punctual in keeping Mr. Micawber's appointment. Although we appeared at the stipulated place a quarter of an hour before the time, we found Mr. Micawber already there. He was standing with his arms folded, over against the wall, looking at the spikes on the top, with a sentimental expression, as if they were the interlacing boughs of trees that had shaded him in his youth. When we accosted him, his manner was something more confused, and something less genteel, than of yore. He had relinquished his legal suit of black for the purposes of this excursion, and wore the old surtout and tights, but not quite with the old air. He gradually picked up more and more of it as we conversed with him, but his very eyeglass seemed to hang. Less easily, and his shirt collar, though still of the old formidable dimensions, rather drooped. "Gentlemen," said Mr. Micawber, after the first salutations, "you are friends in need, and friends indeed. Allow me to offer my inquiries with reference to the physical welfare of Mrs. Copperfield in Essie, and Mrs. Traddles in Posse, presuming, that is to say, that my friend Mr. Traddles is not yet united to the object of his affections, for weal and for woe." We acknowledged his politeness, and made suitable replies. He then directed our attention to the wall, and was beginning, "I assure you, gentlemen," when I ventured to object to that ceremonious form of address, and to beg that he would speak to us in the old way. "My dear Copperfield," he returned, pressing my hand, "your cordiality overpowers me. This reception of a shattered fragment of the temple once called man, if I may be permitted so to express myself, bespeaks a heart that is an honor to our common nature. I was about to observe that I again behold the serene spot where some of the happiest hours of my existence fleeted by. Made so, I am sure, by Mrs. Micawber," said I. "I hope she is well." "Thank you," returned Mr. Micawber, whose face clouded at this reference. "She is but so." "And this," said Mr. Micawber, nodding his head sorrowfully, "is the bench. Where, For the first time in many revolving years, the overwhelming pressure of pecuniary liabilities was not proclaimed, from day to day, by importune voices. Declining to vacate the passage, where there was no knocker on the door for any creditor to appeal to, where personal service of process was not required, and detainees were merely lodged at the gate. "Gentlemen," said Mr. Micawber, "when the shadow of that ironwork on the summit of the brick structure has been reflected on the gravel of the parade, I have seen my children thread the mazes of the intricate pattern, avoiding the dark marks. I have been familiar with every stone in the place. If I betray weakness, you will know how to excuse me." "We have all got on in life since then, Mr. Micawber," said I. "Mr. Copperfield," returned Mr. Micawber, bitterly. "When I was an inmate of that retreat I could look my fellow-man in the face, and punch his head if he offended me. My fellow-man and myself are no longer on those glorious terms." Turning from the building in a downcast manner, Mr. Micawber accepted my proffered arm on one side, and the proffered arm of Traddles on the other, and walked away between us. "There are some landmarks," observed Mr. Micawber, looking fondly back over his shoulder, "on the road to the tomb, which, but for the impiety of the aspiration, a man would wish never to have passed. Such is the bench in my checkered career." "Oh, you are in low spirits, Mr. Micawber," said Traddles. "I am, sir," interposed Mr. Micawber. "I hope," said Traddles, "it is not because—" "Not a word." "How is our friend Heap, Mr. Micawber?" said I, after a silence. "My dear Copperfield," returned Mr. Micawber, bursting into a state of much excitement, and turning pale, "if you ask after my employer as your friend, I am sorry for it. If you ask after him as my friend, I sardonically smile at it. In whatever capacity you ask after my employer, I beg, without offence to you, to limit my reply to this, that whatever his state of health may be, his appearance is foxy, not to say diabolical. You will allow me, as a private individual, to decline pursuing a subject which has lashed me to the utmost verge of desperation in my professional capacity. I express my regret for having innocently touched upon a theme that roused him so much. May I ask," said I, without any hazard of repeating the mistake, "how my old friends Mr. and Miss Wickfield are?" "Miss Wickfield," said Mr. Micawber, now turning red, "is, as she always is, a pattern, and a bright example. My dear Copperfield, she is the only starry spot in a miserable existence. My respect for that young lady, my admiration of her character, my devotion to her for her love and truth, and goodness. Take me," said Mr. Micawber, "down a turning, for, upon my soul, in my present state of mind I am not inspiriting. It is my fate," said Mr. Micawber, unfeignedly sobbing, but doing even that, with a shadow of the old expression of doing something genteel. "It is my fate, gentlemen, that the finer feelings of our nature have become reproaches to me. My homage to Miss Wickfield is a flight of arrows in my bosom. You had better leave me, if you please, to walk the earth as a vagabond. The worm will settle my business in double quick time." Without attending to this invocation, we stood by, until he put up his pocket-handkerchief, pulled up his shirt-collar, and, to delude any person in the neighbourhood who might have been observing him, hummed a tune with his hat very much on one side. I then mentioned, not knowing what might be lost if we lost sight of him yet, that it would give me great pleasure to introduce him to my aunt, if he would ride out to Highgate, where Bed was at his service. "You shall make us a glass of your own punch, Mr. Micawber," said I, "and forget whatever you have on your mind, in pleasanter reminiscences. Or, if confiding anything to friends will be more likely to relieve you, you shall impart it to us, Mr. Micawber, said Traddles, prudently. Gentlemen, returned Mr. Micawber, do with me as you will. I am a straw upon the surface of the deep, and am tossed in all directions by the elephants. I beg your pardon, encountering any difficulties by the way. I was very uneasy and very uncertain in my mind what to say or do for the best. So was Traddles, evidently. Mr. Micawber was for the most part plunged into deep gloom. He occasionally made an attempt to smarten himself, and hum the fag end of a tune, but his relapses into profound melancholy were only made the more impressive by the mockery of a hat exceedingly on one side, and a shirt collar pulled up to his eyes. We went to my aunt's house rather than to mine, because of Dora's not being well. My aunt presented herself on being sent for, and welcomed Mr. Micawber with gracious cordiality. Mr. Micawber kissed her hand, retired to the window, and pulling out his pocket handkerchief, had a mental wrestle with himself. Mr. Dick was at home. He was by nature so exceedingly compassionate of anyone who seemed to be ill at ease, and was so quick to find any such person out, that he shook hands with Mr. Micawber at least half a dozen times in 5 minutes. To Mr. Micawber, in his trouble, this warmth, on the part of a stranger, was so extremely touching, that he could only say, on the occasion of each successive shake, "My dear sir, you overpower me," which gratified Mr. Dick so much, that he went at it again with greater vigour than before. The friendliness of this gentleman, said Mr. Micawber, struggling with a complicated burden of perplexity and disquiet. Such a reception is trying, I assure you. My friend Mr. Dick, replied my aunt proudly, is not a common man. That I am convinced of, said Mr. Micawber. My dear sir, for Mr. Dick was shaking hands with him again, I am deeply sensible of your cordiality. How do you find yourself? Said Mr. Dick, with an anxious look. Indifferent, my dear sir, returned Mr. Micawber, sighing. You must keep up your spirits, said Mr. Dick, and make yourself as comfortable as possible. Mr. Micawber was quite overcome by these friendly words, and by finding Mr. Dick's hand again within his own. It has been my lot, he observed, to meet, in the diversified panorama of human existence, with an occasional oasis, but never with one so green, so gushing, as the present. At another time I should have been amused by this, but I felt that we were all constrained and uneasy, and I watched Mr. Micawber so anxiously, in his vacillations between an evident disposition to reveal something, and a counter-disposition to reveal nothing, that I was in a perfect fever. Traddles, sitting on the edge of his chair, with his eyes wide open, and his hair more emphatically erect than ever, stared by turns at the ground and at Mr. Micawber, without so much as attempting to put in a word in conversation, and made it necessary for him to talk, whether he liked it or not. You are a very old friend of my nephew's, Mr. Micawber, said my aunt. I wish I had had the pleasure of seeing you before. Madam, returned Mr. Micawber, I wish I had had the honour of knowing you at an earlier period. I was not always the wreck you at present behold. I hope Mrs. Micawber and your family are well, sir, said my aunt. Mr. Micawber inclined his head. They are as well, he desperately observed after a pause, as aliens and outcasts can ever hope to be. Lord bless you, sir, exclaimed my aunt, in her abrupt way. What are you talking about? The subsistence of my family, returned Mr. Micawber, trembles in the balance. My employer. Here Mr. Micawber provokingly left off, and began to peel the lemons that had been under my direction set before him, together with all the other appliances he used in making punch. Your employer, you know, said Mr. Dick, jogging his arm as a gentle reminder. "My good sir," returned Mr. Micawber, "you recall me. I am obliged to you." They shook hands again. "My employer, Mr. Heap, once did me the favor to observe to me, that if I were not in the receipt of the stipendiary emoluments appertaining to my engagement with him, I should probably be a mountebank, be reduced to seek a livelihood by personal contortion, while Mrs. Micawber abets their unnatural feats by playing the barrel organ." Mr. Micawber, with a random but expressive flourish of his knife, signified that these performances might be expected to take place after he was no more, then resumed his peeling with a desperate My aunt leaned her elbow on the little round table that she usually kept beside her, and eyed him attentively. Notwithstanding the aversion with which I regarded the idea of entrapping him into any disclosure he was not prepared to make voluntarily, I should have taken him up at this point, but for the strange proceedings in which I saw him engaged, whereof his putting the lemon peel into the kettle, the sugar into the snuffer tray, the spirit into the empty jug, and confidently attempting to pour boiling water out of a candlestick, were among the most remarkable. I saw that a crisis was at hand, and it came. He clattered all his means and implements together, rose from his chair, pulled out his pocket handkerchief, and burst into tears. "My dear Copperfield," said Mr. Micawber, behind his handkerchief, "this is an occupation, of all others, requiring an untroubled mind and self-respect. I cannot perform it. It is out of the question." "Mr. Micawber," said I, "what is the matter? Pray speak out. You are among friends." "Because I am among friends that my state of mind is what it is." "What is the matter, gentlemen? What is not the matter? Villainy is the matter, baseness is the matter, deception, fraud, conspiracy are the matter, and the name of the whole atrocious mass is Heap." My aunt clapped her hands, and we all started up as if we were possessed. "The struggle is over," said Mr. Micawber, violently gesticulating with his pocket handkerchief, and fairly striking out from time to time with both arms, as if he were swimming under superhuman difficulties. "I will lead this life no longer. I am a wretched being, cut off from everything that makes life tolerable. I have been under a taboo in that infernal scoundrel service. Give me back my wife, give me back my family. Substitute Micawber for the petty wretch who walks about in the boots at present on my feet, and call upon me to swallow a sword tomorrow, and I'll do it. With an appetite. I never saw a man so hot in my life. I tried to calm him, that we might come to something rational, but he got hotter and hotter, and wouldn't hear a word. "I'll put my hand in no man's hand," said Mr. Micawber, gasping, puffing, and sobbing, to that degree that he was like a man fighting with cold water, "until I have blown to fragments the detestable serpent Heap. I'll partake of no one's hospitality until I have moved Mount Vesuvius, choke me, unless I had previously choked the eyes out of the head of interminable cheat and liar Heap. I'll know nobody, and say nothing, and live nowhere, until I have crushed to undiscoverable atoms the transcendent and immortal hypocrite and perjurer Heap." I really had some fear of Mr. Micawber's dying on the spot. The manner in which he struggled through these inarticulate sentences, and, whenever he found himself getting near the name of Heap, fought his way onto it, dashed at it in a fainting state, and brought it out with a vehemence little less than marvelous, was frightful. But now, when he sank into a chair, steaming, and looked at us, with every possible colour in his face that had no business there, and an endless procession of lumps following one another in hot haste up his throat, whence they seemed to shoot into his forehead, he had the appearance of being in the last extremity. I would have gone to his assistance, but he waved me off, and wouldn't hear a word. No, Copperfield. No communication, until Miss Wickfield, redress from wrongs inflicted by consummate scoundrel, heap. I am quite convinced he could not have uttered 3 words, but for the amazing energy with which this word inspired him when he felt it coming. Inviolable secret, from the whole world, no, at Canterbury, where, Mrs. Micawber and myself, auld lang syne in chorus, and, will expose intolerable ruffian, heap. No more to say, or listen to persuasion, go immediately, not capable, bear society, upon the track of devoted and doomed traitor, heap. With this last repetition of the magic word that had kept him going at all, and in which he surpassed all his previous efforts, Mr. Micawber rushed out of the house, leaving us in a state of excitement, hope, and wonder, that reduced us to a condition little better than his own. But even then his passion for writing letters was too strong to be resisted, for while we were yet in the height of our excitement, hope, and wonder, the following pastoral note was brought to me from a neighbouring tavern, at which he had called to write it. Most secret and confidential, my dear sir, I beg to be allowed to convey, through you, my apologies to your excellent aunt for my late excitement. An explosion of a smouldering volcano long suppressed was the result of an internal contest more easily conceived than described. I trust one rendered tolerably intelligible my appointment for the morning of this day week, at the house of public entertainment at Canterbury, where Mrs. Micawber and myself had once the honour of uniting our voices to yours, in the well-known strain of the immortal exciseman nurtured, shall be known no more. I shall simply require to be deposited in that place of universal resort, where each in his narrow cell forever laid, the rude forefathers of the hamlet sleep, with the plain inscription, Wilkins Micawber. David Copperfield. Chapter 50. Mr. Peggotty's dream comes true by this time. Some months had passed since our interview on the bank of the river with Martha. I had never seen her since, but she had communicated with Mr. Peggotty on several occasions. Nothing had come of her zealous intervention, nor could I infer, from what he told me, that any clue had been obtained, for a moment, to Emily's fate. I confess that I began to despair of her recovery, and gradually to sink deeper and deeper into the belief that she was dead. His conviction remained unchanged. So far as I know, and I believe his honest heart was transparent to me, he never wavered again, in his solemn certainty of finding her. His patience never tired. And, although I trembled for the agony it might one day be to him to have his strong assurance shivered at a blow, there was something so religious in it, so affectingly expressive of its anchor being in the purest depths of his fine nature, that the respect and honour in which I held him were exalted every day. His was not a lazy trustfulness that hoped, and did no more. He had have known him set out in the night, on a misgiving that the light might not be, by some accident, in the window of the old boat, and walk to Yarmouth. I have known him, on reading something in the newspaper that might apply to her, take up his stick, and go forth on a journey of 3 or 4 score miles. He made his way by sea to Naples, and back, after hearing the narrative to which Miss Dartle had assisted me. All his journeys were ruggedly performed, for he was always steadfast in a purpose of saving money for Emily's sake, when she should be found. In all this long pursuit, I never heard him repine. I never heard him say he was fatigued, or out of heart. Dora had often seen him since our marriage, and was quite fond of him. I fancy his figure before me now, standing near her sofa, with his rough cap in his hand, and the blue eyes of my child-wife raised, with a timid wonder, to his face. Sometimes of an evening, about twilight, when he came to talk with me, I would induce him to smoke his pipe in the garden, as we slowly paced to and fro together, and then, The picture of his deserted home, and the comfortable air it used to have in my childish eyes of an evening when the fire was burning, and the wind moaning round it, came most vividly into my mind. One evening, at this hour, he told me that he had found Martha again. Did she tell you why? I inquired. I asked her, Massa Davy, he replied, but it is but few words as she ever says, and she only got my promise and so went away. Did she say when you might expect to see her again? I demanded. No, Massa Davy, he returned, drawing his hand thoughtfully down his face. I asked that too, but it was more, she said, than she could tell. As I had long forborne to encourage him with hopes that hung on threads, I made no other comment on this information than that I supposed he would see her soon. Such speculations as it engendered within me I kept to myself, and those were faint enough that I was walking alone in the garden, one evening, about a fortnight afterwards. I remember that evening well. It was the second in Mr. Micawber's week of suspense. There had been rain all day, and there was a damp feeling in the air. The leaves were thick upon the trees, and heavy with wet, but the rain had ceased, though the sky was still dark, and the hopeful birds were singing cheerfully. As I walked to and fro in the garden, and the twilight began to close around me, their little voices were hushed, and that peculiar silence which belongs to such an evening in the country when the lightest trees are quite still, save for the occasional droppings from their boughs, prevailed. There was happened to turn my eyes towards this place, as I was thinking of many things, and I saw a figure beyond, dressed in a plain cloak. It was bending eagerly towards me, and beckoning. Martha, said I, going to it. Can you come with me? She inquired, in an agitated whisper. I have been to him, and he is not at home. I wrote down where he was to come, and left it on his table with my own hand. They said he would not be out long. I have tidings for him. Can you come directly? My answer was, to pass out at the gate immediately. She made a hasty gesture with her hand, as if to entreat my patience and my silence, and turned towards London, whence, as her dress betokened, she had come expeditiously on foot. I asked her if that were not our destination. On her motioning yes, with the same hasty gesture as before, I stopped an empty coach that was coming by, and we got into it. When I asked her where the coachman was to drive, she answered, anywhere near Golden Square, and quick. Then shrunk into a corner, with one trembling hand before her face, and the other making the former gesture, as if she could not bear a voice, now much disturbed, and dazzled with conflicting gleams of hope and dread. I looked at her for some explanation. But seeing how strongly she desired to remain quiet, and feeling that it was my own natural inclination too, she thought we were going slowly, though indeed we were going fast, but otherwise remained exactly as at first. We alighted at one of the entrances to the square she had mentioned, where I directed the coach to wait, not knowing but that we might have some occasion for it. She laid her hand on my arm, and hurried me on to one of the sombre streets, of which there are several in that part, where the houses were once fair dwellings in the occupation of single families, but have, and had, long degenerated into poor lodgings let off in rooms. Entering at the open door of one of these, and releasing my arm, she beckoned me to follow her up the common staircase, which was like a tributary channel to the street. The house swarmed with inmates. As we went up, doors of rooms were opened and people's heads put out, and we passed other people on the stairs, who were coming down. In glancing up from the outside, before we entered, I had seen women and children lolling at the windows over flower pots, and we seemed to have attracted their curiosity, for these were principally the observers who looked out of their doors. It was a broad panelled staircase, with massive balustrades of some dark wood, cornices above the doors, ornamented with carved fruit and flowers, and broad seats in the windows. But all these tokens of past grandeur were miserably decayed and dirty. I noticed, to infuse new blood into this dwindling frame, by repairing the costly old woodwork here and there with common deal. But it was like the marriage of a reduced old noble to a plebeian pauper, and each party to the ill-assorted union shrunk away from the other. Several of the back windows on the staircase had been darkened or wholly blocked up. In those that remained, there was scarcely any glass, and, through the crumbling frames by which the bad air seemed always to come in, and never to go out, I saw, through other glassless windows, into other houses in a similar condition, and looked giddily down into a wretched yard, which was the common dust heap of the mansion. We proceeded to the top story of the house. 2 or 3 times, by the way, I thought I observed in the indistinct light the skirts of a female figure going up before us. As we turned to ascend the last flight of stairs between us and the roof, we caught a full view of this figure pausing for a moment, at a door. Then it turned the handle, and went in. "What's this?" said Martha, in a whisper. "She has gone into my room. I don't know her." I knew her. I had recognized her with amazement, for Miss Dartle I said something to the effect that it was a lady whom I had seen before, in a few words, to my conductress, and had scarcely done so, when we heard her voice in the room, the stairs, and then, by a little back door which seemed to have no lock, and which she pushed open with a touch, into a small empty garret with a low sloping roof, little better than a cupboard. Between this, and the room she had called hers, there was a small door of communication, standing partly open. Here we stopped, breathless with our ascent, and she placed her hand lightly on my lips. I could only see, of the room beyond, that it was pretty large, that there was a bed in it, and that there were some common pictures of ships upon the walls. I could not see Miss Dartle, or the person whom we had heard her address. Certainly, my companion could not, for my position was the best. A dead silence prevailed for some moments. Martha kept one hand on my lips, and raised the other in a listening attitude. "It matters little to me her not being at home," said Rosa Dartle haughtily. "I know nothing of her. It is you I come to see." "Me?" replied a soft voice. The sound of it, a thrill went through my frame. For it was Emily's. "Yes," returned Miss Dartle. "I have come to look at you." "What? You are not ashamed of the face that has done so much?" The resolute and unrelenting hatred of her tone, its cold stern sharpness, and its mastered rage, presented her before me, as if I had seen her standing in the light. "I saw, come to see," she said, "James Steerforth's fancy, the girl who ran away with him, and is the town talk of the commonest people of her native place, the bold, flaunting, practised companion of persons like James Steerforth. I want to know what such a thing is like." There was a rustle, as if the unhappy girl, on whom she heaped these taunts, ran towards the door, and the speaker swiftly interposed herself before it. It was succeeded by a moment's pause. When Miss Dartle spoke again, it was through her set teeth, and with a stamp upon the ground. "Stay there," she said, "or I'll proclaim you to the house, and the whole street. If you try to evade me, I'll stop you, if it's by the hair, and raise the very stones against you." A frightened murmur was the only reply that reached my ears. A silence succeeded. I did not know what to do. Much as I desired to put an end to the interview, I felt that I had no right to present myself, that it was for Mr. Peggotty alone to see her and recover her. Would he never come? I thought impatiently. "So," said Rosa Dartle, with a contemptuous laugh, "I see her at last. Why, he was a poor creature to be taken by that delicate mock modesty, and that hanging head." "Oh, for heaven's sake, spare me!" exclaimed Emily. "Whoever you are, You know my pitiable story, and for heaven's sake spare me, if you would be spared yourself. Emily, with a burst of tears, and that, said Rosadartle, is so strong a claim, preferred by one so infamous, that if I had any feeling in my breast but scorn and abhorrence of you, it would freeze it up. Our sex. You are an honor to our sex. I have deserved this, said Emily, but it's dreadful. Dear, dear lady, think what I have suffered, and how I am fallen. Oh, Martha, come back. Oh, home, home. Miss Dartle placed herself in a chair, within view of the door, and looked downward, as if Emily were crouching on the floor before her. Being now between me and the light, I could see her curled lip, and her cruel eyes intently fixed on one place, with a greedy triumph. Listen to what I say, she said, and reserve your false arts for your dupes. Do you hope to move me by your tears? No more than you could charm me by your smiles, you purchased slave. Oh, have some mercy on me, cried Emily. Show me some compassion, or I shall die mad. It would be no great penance, said Rosadartle, for your crimes. Do you know what you have done? Do you ever think of the home you have laid waste? Oh, is there ever night or day when I don't think of it? Cried Emily, and now I could just see her, on her knees, with her head thrown back, her pale face looking upward, her hands wildly clasped and held out, upon it forever and forever. Oh, home, home. Oh dear, dear uncle, if you ever could have known the agony your love would cause me when I fell away from good, you never would have shown it to me so constant, much as you felt it, but would have been angry to me, at least once in my life, that I might have had some comfort. I have none, no comfort upon earth, for all of them were always fond of me. She dropped on her face, before the imperious figure in the chair. With an imploring effort to clasp the skirt of her dress, Rosadartle sat looking down upon her, as inflexible as a figure of brass. Her lips were tightly compressed, as if she knew that she must keep a strong constraint upon herself. I write what I sincerely believe, or she would be tempted to strike the beautiful form with her foot. I saw her, distinctly, and the whole power of her face and character seemed forced into that expression. Would he never come? The miserable vanity of these earthworms, she said, when she had so far controlled the angry heavings of her breast that she could trust herself to speak. Your home. Do you imagine that I bestow a thought on it, or suppose you could do any harm to that low place, which money would not pay for, and handsomely? Your home. You were a part of the trade of your home, and were bought and sold like any other vendible thing your people dealt in, folks who are as honorable as you. Have some respect for them, as you are a lady, if you have no mercy for me. I speak, she said, not deigning to take any heed of this appeal, and drawing away her dress from the contamination of Emily's touch. I speak of his home, where I live. Here, she said, stretching out her hand with her contemptuous laugh, and looking down upon the prostrate girl, is a worthy cause of division between lady mother and gentleman son, of grief in a house where she wouldn't have been admitted as a kitchen girl, of anger, and repining, and reproach. This piece of pollution, picked up from the waterside, to be made much of for an hour, and then tossed back to her original place. No, no, cried Emily, clasping her hands together. When he first came into my way, that the day had never dawned upon me, and he had met me being carried to my grave. I had been brought up as virtuous as you or any lady, and was going to be the wife of as good a man as you or any lady in the world can ever marry. If you live in his home and know him, you know, perhaps, what his power with a weak, vain girl might be. I don't defend myself, but I know well, and he knows well, or he will know when he comes to die, and his mind is troubled with it, that he used all his power to deceive me, and that I believed him, trusted him, and loved him. Passion, that I had almost thrown myself between them. The blow, which had no aim, fell upon the air. As she now stood panting, looking at her with the utmost detestation that she was capable of expressing, and trembling from head to foot with rage and scorn, I thought I had never seen such a sight, and never could see such another. "You love him? You?" she cried, with her clenched hand, quivering as if it only wanted a weapon to stab the object of her wrath. Emily had shrunk out of my view. There was no reply. "And tell that to me," she added, "with your shameful lips? Why don't they whip these creatures? If I could order it to be done, I would have this girl whipped to death." And so she would, I have no doubt. I would not have trusted her with the rack itself, while that furious look lasted. She slowly, very slowly, broke into a laugh, and pointed at Emily with her hand, as if she were a sight of shame for gods and men. "She love," she said, "that carrion. And he ever cared for her, she'd tell me. Ha, ha! The liars that these traders are." Her mockery was worse than her undisguised rage. Of the two, I would have much preferred to be the object of the latter. But, when she suffered it to break loose, it was only for a moment. She had chained it up again, and however it might tear her within, she subdued it to herself. "I came here, you pure fountain of love, tell you, that you had best seek that home of yours, with all speed, and hide your head among those excellent people who are expecting you, and whom your money will console. When it's all gone, you can believe, and trust, and love again, you know. I thought you a broken toy that had lasted its time, a worthless spangle that was tarnished, and thrown away. But, finding you true gold, a very lady, and an ill-used innocent, with a fresh heart full of love and trustfulness, which you look like, and is quite consistent with your story, I have something more to say. Attend to it, for what I say I'll do. Do you hear me, you fairy spirit? What I say, I mean to do." Her rage got the better of her again, for a moment, but it passed over her face like a spasm, and left her smiling. "Hide yourself," she pursued, "if not at home, somewhere. Let it be somewhere beyond reach, in some obscure life, or, better still, in some obscure death. I wonder, if your loving heart will not break, you have found no way of helping it to be still. I have heard of such means sometimes. I believe they may be easily found." A low crying, on the part of Emily, interrupted her here. She stopped, and listened to it as if it were music. "I am of a strange nature, perhaps," Rosadardle went on, "but I can't breathe freely in the air you breathe. I find common stare. There are decent women in the house, I am told, and it is a pity such a light as you should be among them, and concealed. If, leaving here, you seek any refuge in this town in any character but your true one, which you are welcome to bear, without molestation from me, the same service shall be done you, if I hear of your retreat. Being assisted by a gentleman who not long ago aspired to the favour of your hand, I am sanguine as to that. Would he never, never come? How long was I to bear this? How long could I bear it? Oh me, exclaimed the wretched Emily, in a tone that might have touched the hardest heart, I should have thought, but there was no relenting in Rosadardle's smile. What shall I do?" "Do," returned the other. "Live happy in your own reflections. Consecrate your existence to the recollection of James Steerforth's tenderness. He would have made you his serving man's wife, would he not? Or to feeling grateful to the upright and deserving creature who would have taken you as his gift. Or, if those proud remembrances, and the consciousness of your own virtues, and the honorable position to which they have raised you in the eyes of everything that wears the human shape, will not sustain you, marry that good man, and be happy in his condescension. If this will not do either, die. There are doorways and dust. I was certain. It was his, thank God. She moved slowly from before the door when she said this, and passed out of my sight. But Mark, she added, slowly and sternly, opening the other door to go away, I am resolved, for reasons that I have and hatreds that I entertain, to cast you out, unless you withdraw from my reach altogether, or drop your pretty mask. This is what I had to say, and what I say, I mean to do. The foot upon the stairs came nearer, nearer, past her as she went down, rushed into the room. Uncle. A fearful cry followed the word. I paused a moment, and looking in, saw him supporting her insensible figure in his arms. He gazed for a few seconds in the face, then stooped to kiss it, oh, how tenderly, and drew a handkerchief before it. Massa Davy, he said, in a low tremulous voice, when it was covered, I thank my heathen father as my dreams come true. I thank him hearty for having guided of me, in his own ways, to my darling. With those words he took her up in his arms, and, with the veiled face lying on his bosom, and addressed toward his own, carried her, motionless and unconscious, down the stairs. David Copperfield. Chapter 51. The beginning of a longer journey. It was yet early in the morning of the following day, when, as I was walking in my garden with my aunt, who took little other exercise, on my going towards the gate, and bared his head, as it was always his custom to do when he saw my aunt, for whom he had a high respect. I had been telling her all that had happened overnight. Without saying a word, she walked up with a cordial face, shook hands with him, and patted him on the arm. It was so expressively done, that she had no need to say a word. Mr. Peggotty understood her quite as well as if she had said 1,000. I'll go in now, Trot, said my aunt, and look after little Blossom, who will be getting up presently. Not along of my being here, I hope, said Mr. Peggotty, unless my wits is gone a bard's neezing, by which Mr. Peggotty meant to say, bird's nesting, this morning. 'Tis along of me as you're going to quit us. You have something to say, my good friend, returned my aunt, and will do better without me. By your leave, returned Mr. Peggotty, I should take it kind, purvosing you don't mind my claquetin, if you'd bide here. Would you? Said my aunt, with short good nature. Then I am sure I will. So, she drew her arm through Mr. Peggotty's, and walked with him to a leafy little summer house there was at the bottom of the garden, where she sat down on a bench, and I beside her. There was a seat for Mr. Peggotty too, but he preferred to stand, leaning his hand on the sinewy hand expressed, and what a good and trusty companion it was to his honest brow and iron-grey hair. I took my dear child away last night, Mr. Peggotty began, as he raised his eyes to ours, to my lodging, where I have a long time been expecting of her and preparing for her. It was hours afore she knowed me right, and when she did, she kneeled down at my feet, and kinder said to me, as if it was her prayers, how it all come to be. You may believe me, when I heard her voice, as I had heard at home so playful, and see her humbled, as it might be in the dust our Saviour wrote in with his blessed hand, I felt a wound go to my heart, in the midst of all its thankfulness. He drew his sleeve across his face, without any pretence of concealing why, and then cleared his voice. It warn't for long as I felt that, for she was found. I had ony to think as she was found, and it was gone. I don't know why I do so much as mention of it now, I'm sure. I didn't have it in my mind a minute ago, to say a word about myself, but it come up so natural, that I yielded to it afore I was o'er. You are a self-denying soul, said my aunt, and will have your reward. Mr. Peggotty, with the shadows of the leaves playing athwart his face, made a surprised inclination of the head towards my aunt, as an acknowledgment of her good opinion, that the spotted snake as Master Davy see, and his story's true, and may God confound him. She took flight in the night. It was a dark night, with a many stars a-shining. She was wild. She ran along the sea beach, believing the old boat was thorough, and calling out to us to turn away our faces, for she was a-coming by. She heard herself a-crying out, like as if it was another person, and cut herself on them sharp pint stones and rocks, and felt it no more than if she had been rock herself. Ever so fur she run, and there was fire afore her eyes, and roarings in her ears. Of a sudden, or so she thought, you understand, the day broke, wet and windy, and she was lying below a heap of stone upon the shore, and a woman was a-speaking to her, saying, in the language of that country, what was it as had gone so much amiss? He saw everything he related. It passed before him, as he spoke, so vividly, that, in the intensity of his earnestness, he presented what he described to me, with greater distinctness than I can express. I can hardly believe, writing now long afterwards, but that I was actually present in these scenes. They are impressed upon me with such an astonishing air of fidelity as Emily's eyes, which was heavy. See this woman better, Mr. Peggotty went on. She knowed as she was one of them as she had often talked to on the beach. Carriages, and knowed all that country, long the coast, miles and miles. She hadn't no children of her own, this woman, being a young wife, but she was a-looking to have one afore long. And may my prayers go up to heaven that 'twill be a happiness to her, and a comfort, and a honour, all her life. May it love her and be dutiful to her, in her old age, helpful of her at the last, a angel to her here, and hereafter. Amen, said my aunt. She had been somewhat timorous and down, said Mr. Peggotty, and had sat, at first, a little way off, at her spinning, or such work as it was, when Emily talked to the children. But Emily had took notice of her, and had gone and spoke to her, and as the young woman was partial to the children herself, they had soon made friends. Surmixa, that when Emily went that way, she always give Emily flowers. This was her as now asked what it was that had gone so much amiss. Emily told her, and she took her home. She did indeed. She took her home, said Mr. Peggotty, covering his face till he was more affected by this act of kindness than I had ever seen him affected by anything since the night she went away. My aunt and I did not attempt to disturb him. It was a little cottage, you may suppose, he said, presently, but she found space for Emily in it. Her husband was away at sea, and she kept it secret. Maybe 'tis not so strange to scholars. The language of that country went out of her head, and she could only speak her own, that no one understood. She recollects, as if she had dreamed it, that she lay there always a-talking her own tongue, always believing as the old boat was round the next pint in the bay, and begging and imploring of em to send there and tell how she was dying, and bring back a message of forgiveness, if it was only a word. Amos the whole time, she thought, now, that him as I made mention on just now was lurking for her underneath the window, now that him as had brought her to this was in the room, and cried to the good young woman not to give her up, and knowed, at the same time, that she couldn't understand, and dreaded that she must be took away. Likewise the fire was afore her eyes, and the roarings in her ears, and there was no today, nor yesterday, nor yet tomorrow, but everything in her life as ever had been, or as ever could be, and everything as never had been, and as never could be, was a-crowding on her all at once, and nothing clear nor welcome, and yet she sang and laughed about it. How long this lasted, I don't know. But then there come a sleep, and in that sleep, from being a many times stronger than her own self, she fell into the weakness of the littlest child. Here he stopped. She awoke, and so quiet, that there warn't a sound but the rippling of that blue sea without a tide, upon the shore. It was her belief, at first, that she was at home upon a Sunday morning, but the vine leaves as she see at the window, and the hills beyond, warn't home, and contradicted of her. Then, come in her friend to watch alongside of her bed, and then she knowed as the old boat warn't round that next pint in the bay no more, but was fur off, and knowed where she was, and why, and broke out a crying on that good young woman's bosom, where I hope her baby is a-lying now, a-cheering of her with its pretty eyes. He could not speak of this good friend of Emily's without a flow of tears. It was in vain to try. He broke down again, endeavouring to bless her. That done my Emily good, he resumed, after such emotion as I could not behold without sharing in. And as to my aunt, she wept with all her heart. That done Emily good, and she began to mend. But the language of that country was quite gone from her, and she was forced to make signs. So she went on, getting better from day to day, slow, but sure, and trying to learn the names of common things, names as she seemed never to have heard in all her life, till one evening come, when she was a-setting at her window, looking at a little girl at play upon the beach, and of a sudden this child, first to call her pretty lady, as the general way in that country is, and that she had taught him to call her fisherman's daughter instead. The child says of a sudden, "Fisherman's daughter, here's a shell." Then Emily understands her, and she answers, bursting out a-crying, and it all comes back. When Emily got strong again, said Mr. Peggotty, after another short interval of silence, she cast about to leave that good young creature, and get to her own country. The husband was come home, then, and the two together put her aboard a small trader bound to Leghorn, and from that to France. She had a little money, but it was less than little as they would take for all they done. I'm a'most glad on it, though they was so poor. What they done, is laid up where neither moth or rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. Massa Davy, it'll outlast all the treasure in the world. Emily got to France, and took service to wait on travelling ladies at an inn in the port. There come, one day, that snake. Let him never come nigh me. I don't know what hurt I might do him. Soon as she see him, without him seeing her, all her fear and wildness returned upon her, and she fled afore the very breath he drawed. She come to England, and was set ashore at Dover. I don't know, said Mr. Peggotty, for sure it. But fear of not being forgive, fear of being pint at, fear of some of us being dead along of her, fear of many things, turned her from it, keened by force, upon the road. Uncle, uncle, she says to me, the fear of not being worthy to do what my torn and bleeding breast so longed to do, was the most frightening fear of all. I turned back, when my heart was full of prayers that I might crawl to the old doorstep, in the night, kiss it, lay my wicked face upon it, and there be found dead in the morning. She come, said Mr. Peggotty, dropping his voice to an awe-stricken whisper, to London. She, as had never seen it in her life, alone, without a penny, young, so pretty, come to London. A'most the moment as she lighted here, all so desolate, she found, as she believed, a friend, a decent woman as spoke to her about the needlework as she had been brought up to do, about finding plenty of it for her, about a lodging for the night, and making secret inquiration concerning of me and all at home, tomorrow. When my child, he said aloud, and with an energy of gratitude that shook him from head to foot, stood upon the brink of more than I can say or think on, Martha, true to her promise, saved her. I could not repress a cry of joy. "Massa Davy," said he, gripping my hand in that strong hand of his, "it was you as first made mention of her to me." I then, above all, she come, white and hurried, upon Emily in her sleep. She says to her, "Rise up from worse than death, and come with me." Them belonging to the house would have stopped her, but they might as soon have stopped the sea. "Stand away from me," she says. "I am a ghost that calls her from beside her open grave." She told Emily she had seen me, and knowed I loved her, and forgive her. She wrapped her, hasty, in her clothes. She took her, faint and trembling, on her arm. She heeded no more what they said, than if she had had no ears. She walked among 'em with my child, minding only her, and brought her safe out, in the dead of the night, from that black pit of ruin. She attended on Emily, said Mr. Peggotty, who had released my hand, and put his own hand on his heaving chest. She attended to my Emily, lying wearied out, and wandering betwixt whiles, till late next day. Then she went in search of me, then in search of you, Massa Davy. She didn't tell Emily what she come out for, lest her art should fail, and she should think of hiding of herself. How the cruel lady knowed of her being there, I can't say. Whether him as I have spoke so much of, chanced to see him going there, or whether, which is most like, to my thinking, he had hid it from the woman, I don't greatly ask myself. "My niece is found, all night long," said Mr. Peggotty. "'Tis less as I have seen of her dear face, as growed into a woman's at my hearth. But, all night long, her arms has been about my neck, and her head has laid here, and we knows full well, as we can put our trust in one another, evermore." He ceased to speak, and his hand upon the table rested there in perfect repose, with a resolution in it that might have conquered lions. It was a gleam of light upon me. "Trot," said my aunt, drying her eyes, "when I formed the resolution of being godmother to your sister Betsy Trotwood, who disappointed me, but, next to that, hardly anything would have given me greater pleasure than to be godmother to that good young creature's baby." Mr. Peggotty nodded his understanding of my aunt's feelings, but could not trust himself with any verbal reference to the subject of her commendation. We all remained silent, and occupied with our own reflections, my aunt drying her eyes, and now sobbing convulsively, and now laughing and calling herself a fool, until I spoke. "You have quite made up your mind," said I to Mr. Peggotty, "as to the future, good friend? I need scarcely ask you." "Quite, Massa Davy," he returned, and told Emily, "There is mighty countries, fur from here. Our future life lays over the sea." "They will emigrate together, aunt," said I. "Yes," said Mr. Peggotty, with a hopeful smile. "No one can't reproach my down at the docks early this morning, sir," he returned, "to get information concerning of them ships. In about 6 weeks or 2 months from now, there'll be one sailing. I see her this morning, went aboard, and we shall take our passage in her." "Quite alone?" I asked. "Aye, Massa Davy," he returned. "My sister, you see, she's that fond of you and yourn, and that accustomed to think ony of her own country, that it wouldn't be hardly fair to let her go. Besides which, there is one she has in charge, Massa Davy, as don't ought to be forgot." "Poor Ham," said I. "My good sister takes care of his house, you see, and he takes kindly to her," Mr. Peggotty explained for my aunt's better information. "He'll sit and talk to her, with a calm spirit, when it's like he couldn't bring himself to open his lips to another." "Poor fellow," said Mr. Peggotty, shaking his head. "There is not so much left him, that he could spare the little as he has." "And Mrs. Gummidge," said I. "Well, I've had a mort of consideration, I do tell you," returned Mr. Peggotty, with a perplexed look which gradually cleared as he went on, concerning of Mrs. Gummidge. You see, when Mrs. Gummidge falls a-thinking of the old UN, she ain't what you may call good company. Betwixt you and me, Marser Davy, and you, when Mrs. Gummidge takes to wimicking, our old Peggotty, and I knowed his merits, so I understand her, but ta'n't entirely so, you see, with others, Nat Raleigh can't be. My aunt and I both acquiesced, whereby, said Mr. Peggotty, my sister might, I don't say she would, but might, find Mrs. Gummidge give her a leetle trouble now and again. Theophor ta'n't my intentions to moor Mrs. Gummidge long with them, but to find a being for her where she can fisherate for herself. A being signifies, in that dialect, a home, and to fisherate is to provide. For which purpose, said Mr. Peggotty, I means to make her allowance afore I go, as'll leave her pretty comfortably. She's the faithfullest of creeturs. Ta'n't to be expected, of course, at her time of life, and being lone and lorn, as the good old Motherer is to be knocked about aboard ship, and in the woods and wilds of a new and far-away country. So that's what I'm going to do with her. He forgot nobody. He thought of everybody's claims and strivings, but his own Emily, he continued, will keep along with me, poor child, she's sore in need of peace and rest, until such time as we goes upon our voyage. She'll work at them clothes, as must be made, and I hope her troubles will begin to seem longer ago than they was, when she finds herself once more by her rough but loving uncle. My aunt nodded gravely, taking out the little paper bundle I had seen before, which he unrolled on the table. There's these here banknotes, £50 and 10. To them I wish to add the money as she come away with. I've asked her about that, but not saying why, and have added of it up. I ain't a scholar. Would you be so kind as see how 'tis? He handed me, apologetically for his scholarship, a piece of paper, and observed me while I looked it over. It was quite right then, Key, sir, he said, taking it back. This money, if you don't see objections, Marser Davy, I shall put up just afore I go, in a cover directed to him, and put that up in another, directed to his mother. I shall tell her, in no more words than I speak to you, what it's the price on, and that I'm gone, and past receiving of it back. I told him that I thought it would be right to do so, that I was thoroughly convinced it would be, since he felt it to be right. I said that there was only one thing further, he proceeded with a grave smile, when he had made up his little bundle again, and put it in his pocket, but there was two. I warn't sure in my mind, when I come out this morning, as I could go and break to ham, of my own self, what had so thankfully happened. So I writ a letter while I was out, and put it in the post office, telling of him how all was as 'tis, and that I wish me to go with you, said I, seeing that he left something unsaid. If you could do me that kind favour, Marser Davy, he replied, I know the sight on you would cheer him up a bit. My little Dora being in good spirits, and very desirous that I should go, as I found on talking it over with her, I readily pledged myself to accompany him in accordance with his wish. Next morning, consequently, we were on the Yarmouth coach, and again travelling over the old ground as we passed along the familiar street at night, Mr. Peggotty, in despite of all my remonstrances, carrying my bag. I glanced into Omer and Joram's shop, and saw my old friend Mr. Omer there, smoking his pipe. I felt reluctant to be present, when Mr. Peggotty first met his sister and Ham, and made Mr. Omer my excuse for lingering behind. How is Mr. Omer, after this long time? Said I, going in. He fanned away the smoke of his pipe, that he might get a better view of me, and soon recognized me with great delight. I should get up, sir, to acknowledge such an honor as this visit, said he. Only my limbs are rather out of sorts, and I am wheeled about. With the exception of my limbs and my breath, howsoever, I am as hardy as a man can be, I'm thankful to say. I congratulated him on his contented looks and his good spirits, and saw, now, that his easy chair went on wheels, its feather, and tracks as true as a mail coach. Bless you, my little Minnie. My granddaughter, you know, Minnie's child, puts her little strength against the back, gives it a shove, and away we go, as clever and merry as ever you see anything. And I tell you what, it's a most uncommon chair to smoke a pipe in. I never saw such a good old fellow to make the best of a thing, and find out the enjoyment of it, as Mr. Omer. He was as radiant, as if his chair, his asthma, and the failure of his limbs, were the various branches of a great invention for enhancing the luxury of a pipe. I see more of the world, I can assure you, said Mr. Omer, in this chair, than ever I see out of it. You'd be surprised at the number of people that looks in of a day to have a chat. You really would. There's twice as much in the newspaper, since I've taken to this chair, as there used to be. As to general reading, dear me, what a lot of it I do get through. That's what I feel so strong, you know. If it had been my eyes, what should I have done? If it had been my ears, what should I have done? Being my limbs, what does it signify? Why, my limbs only made my breath shorter when I used them. And now, if I want to go out into the street or down to the sands, I've only got to call Dick, Joram's youngest prentice, and away I go in my own carriage, like the Lord. Lean, that's what he must make up his mind to, in this life. Joram does a fine business. Excellent business. I am very glad to hear it, said I. I knew you would be, said Mr. Omer. And Joram and Minnie are like valentines. What more can a man expect? What's his limbs to that? His supreme contempt for his own limbs, as he sat smoking, was one of the pleasantest oddities I have ever encountered, and since I've took to general reading, you've took to general writing, eh, sir? Said Mr. Omer, surveying me admiringly. What a lovely work that was of yours! What expressions in it! I read it every word, every word. And as to feeling sleepy, not at all. I laughingly expressed my satisfaction, but I must confess that I thought this association of ideas significant. I give you my word and honor, sir, said Mr. Omer, that when I lay that book upon the table, and look at it outside, compact in 3 separate and individual volumes, 1, 2, 3, I am as proud as Punch to think that I once had the honor of being connected with your family. And dear me, it's a long time ago, now, ain't it? Over at Blunderstone, with a pretty little party laid along with the other party. And you quite a small party then, yourself. Dear, dear. I changed the subject by referring to Emily. After assuring him that I knew would please the old man. He listened with the utmost attention, and said, feelingly, when I had done, I am rejoiced at it, sir. It's the best news I have heard for many a day. Dear, dear, dear. And what's going to be undertook for that unfortunate young woman, Martha, now? You touch a point that my thoughts have been dwelling on since yesterday, said I, but on which I can give you no information yet, Mr. Omer. Mr. Peggotty has not alluded to it, and I have a delicacy in doing so. I am sure he has not forgotten it. He forgets nothing that is disinterested and good. Because you know, said Mr. Omer, taking himself up, where he had left off, whatever is done, I should wish to be a member of. Put me down for anything you may consider right, and let me know. I never could think the girl all bad, and I am glad to find she's not. So will my daughter Minnie be. Young women are contradictory creatures in some things. Her mother was just the same as her, but their hearts are soft and kind. It's all show with Minnie, about Martha. Why she should consider it necessary to make any show, I don't undertake to tell you. But it's all show, bless you. She'd do her any kindness in private. So, put me down for whatever you may consider right. Will you be so good? And drop me a line where to forward it. Dear me. Time, in his speeches of Go-Kart, he should be overjoyed to do a kindness if he can. He wants plenty. And I don't speak of myself, particular, said Mr. Omer, because, sir, the way I look at it is, that we are all drawing on to the bottom of the hill, whatever age we are, on account of time never standing still for a single moment. So let us always do a kindness, and be overjoyed. To be sure. He knocked the ashes out of his pipe, and put it on a ledge in the back of his chair, expressly made for its reception. There's Emily's cousin, him that she was to have been married to, said Mr. Omer, rubbing his hands feebly. As fine a fellow as there is in Yarmouth. He'll come and talk or read to me, in the evening, for an hour together sometimes. That's a kindness, I should call it. All his life's a kindness. I am going to see him now, said I. Are you? Said Mr. Omer. Tell him I was hearty, and sent my respects. Minnie and Joram's at a ball. They would be as proud to see you as I am, if they was at home. Minnie won't hardly go out at all, you see, on account of father, as she says. So I swore tonight, that if she didn't go, I'd go to bed at 6. In consequence of which, Mr. Omer shook himself and his chair with laughter at the success of his device. She and Joram's at a ball. I shook hands with him, and wished him good night. Sight. Minnie. A musical little voice answered, from somewhere upstairs, I am coming, grandfather. And a pretty little girl with long, flaxen, curling hair, soon came running into the shop. This is my little elephant, sir, said Mr. Omer, fondling the child. Siamese breed, sir. Now, little elephant. The little elephant set the door of the parlor open, enabling me to see that, in these latter days, it was converted into a bedroom for Mr. Omer, who could not be easily conveyed upstairs, and then hid her pretty forehead, and tumbled her long hair, against the back of Mr. Omer's chair. The elephant butts, you know, sir, said Mr. Omer, winking, when he goes at her object. Once. Elephant. Twice. 3 times. At this signal, the little elephant, with a dexterity that was next to marvelous in so small an animal, whisked the chair round with Mr. Omer in it, and rattled it off, pell-mell, into the parlor, without touching the doorpost. Mr. Omer indescribably enjoying the performance, and looking back at me on the road as if it were the triumphant issue of his life's exertions. After a stroll about the town, I went to Ham's house. Peggotty had now removed here for good, and had let her own house to the successor of Mr. Barkey's in the carrying business, who had paid her very well for the goodwill, cart, and horse. Boat by Mr. Peggotty himself. I doubt if she could have been induced to desert her post by anyone else. He had evidently told them all. Both Peggotty and Mrs. Gummidge had their aprons to their eyes, and Ham had just stepped out to take a turn on the beach. He presently came home, very glad to see me, and I hope they were all the better for my being there. We spoke, with some approach to cheerfulness, of Mr. Peggotty's growing rich in a new country, and of the wonders he would describe in his letters. We said nothing of Emily by name, but distantly referred to her more than once. Ham was the serenest of the party, but, Peggotty told me, when she lighted me to a little chamber where the crocodile book was lying ready for me on the table, that he always was the same. She believed, she told me, crying, that he was broken-hearted. though he was as full of courage as of sweetness, and worked harder and better than any boat builder in any yard in all that part. There were times, she said, of an evening, when he talked of their old life in the boathouse, and then he mentioned Emily as a child. But he never mentioned her as a woman that I thought I had read in his face that he would like to speak to me alone. I therefore resolved to put myself in his way next evening, as he came home from his work. Having settled this with myself, I felt old boat, and the wind murmured with the old sound round his head all next day. He was occupied in disposing of his fishing boat and tackle, in packing up, and sending to London by wagon, such of his little domestic possessions as he thought would be useful to him, and in parting with the rest, or bestowing them on Mrs. Gummidge. She was with him all day. As I had a sorrowful wish to see the old place once more, before it was locked up, I engaged to meet them there in the evening. But I so arranged it, as that I should meet Ham first, that it was easy to come in his way, as I knew where he worked. I met him at a retired part of the sands, which I knew he would cross, and turned back with him, that he might have leisure to speak to me if he really wished. I had not mistaken the expression of his face. We had walked but a little way together, when he said, without looking at me, "Massa Davy, have you seen her?" Only for a moment, when she was in a swoon. I softly answered that we walked a little farther, and he said, "Massa Davy, shall you see her, do you think?" "It would be too painful to her, perhaps," said I. "I have thought of that," he replied. "So 'twould, sir, so 'twould." "But, Ham," said I, gently, "if there is anything that I could write to her, for you, in case I could not tell it, if there is anything you would wish to make known to her through me, I should consider it a sacred—" "What is it?" We walked a little farther in silence, and then he spoke. "Tant that I forgive her. Tant that so much. 'Tis more as I beg of her to forgive me, for having pressed my affections upon her. Odd times, I think that if I hadn't had her promise fur to marry me, sir, she was that trustful of me, in a friendly way, that she'd have told me what was struggling in her mind, and would have counselled with me, and I might have saved her." I pressed his hand. "Is that all?" "There is yet a something else," he returned, "if I can say it, Massa Davy." We walked on, farther than we had walked yet, before he spoke again. He was not crying when he made the pauses I shall express by lines. He was merely collecting himself to speak very plainly. I loved her, and I loved the memoir of her, too deep, to be able to lead her to believe of my own self as I'm a happy man. I could only be happy by forgetting of her, and I'm afeard I couldn't hardly bear as she should be told I done that. But if you, being so full of learning, Massa Davy, could think of anything to say as might bring her to believe I wasn't greatly hurt, still loving of her, and mourning for her, anything as might bring her to believe as I was not tired of my life, and yet was hoping fur to see her without blame, with the wicked cease from troubling and the weary are at rest. She was, I should ask of you to say that, with my prayers for her, that was so dear. I pressed his manly hand again, and told him I would charge myself to do this as well as I could. "I then key, sir," he answered. "'Twas kind of you to meet me. 'Twas kind of you to bear him company down. Massa Davy, I understand very well, though my aunt will come to London afore they sail, and they'll unite once more, that I am not like to see him again. I fare to feel sure on't. We don't say so, but so 'twill be, and better so. The last you see on him, the very last, will you give him the lovingest duty and thanks of the orphan, as he was ever more than a father to." This I also promised, faithfully. "I then key a Jean, sir," he said, heartily shaking hands. "I know where you're a-going. Good-bye." With a slight wave of his hand, as though to explain to me that he could not enter the old place, he turned away. As I looked after his figure, crossing the waste in the moonlight, I saw him turn his face towards a strip of silvery light upon the sea, and pass on, looking at it, until he was a shadow in the distance. The door of the boathouse stood open when I approached, and, on entering, I found it emptied of all its furniture, saving one of the old lockers, on which Mrs. Gummidge, with a basket on her knee, was seated, looking at Mr. Peggotty, in a cheery manner, come, according to promise, to bid farewell to tea, Marser Davy, he said, taking up the candle. Bare enough, now, an't it? Indeed you have made good use of the time, said I. Why, we have not been idle, sir. Mrs. Gummidge has worked like I don't know what Mrs. Gummidge ain't worked like, said Mr. Peggotty, looking at her, at a loss for a sufficiently approving simile. Mrs. Gummidge, leaning on her basket, made no observation. There is the very locker that you used to sit on, long with Emily, said Mr. Peggotty, in a whisper. I'm going to carry it away with me, last of all. And here's your old little bedroom, see, Marser Davy. A'most as bleak tonight, as art could wish. In truth, the wind, though it was low, had a solemn sound, and crept around the deserted house with a whispered wailing that was very mournful. Everything was gone, down to the little mirror with the oyster-shell frame. I thought of myself, lying here, when that first great change was being wrought at home. I thought of the blue-eyed child who had enchanted me. I thought of Steerforth, and a foolish, fearful fancy came upon me of his being near at hand, and liable to be met at any turn. "'Tis like to be long," said Mr. Peggotty, in a low voice, "afore the boat finds new tenants. They look upon tea, down here, as being unfortunate now. Tonight." We looked into the other little room, and came back to Mrs. Gummidge, sitting on the locker, whom Mr. Peggotty, putting the light on the chimney-piece, requested to rise, that he might carry it outside the door before extinguishing the candle. "Dan'l," said Mrs. Gummidge, suddenly deserting her basket, and clinging to his arm, "my dear Dan'l, the parting words I speak in this house is, I mustn't be left behind. Don't ye think of leaving me behind, Dan'l. Oh, don't ye ever do it." Mr. Peggotty, taken aback, looked from Mrs. Gummidge to me, and from me to Mrs. Gummidge, as if he had been awakened from a sleep. "Don't ye, dearest Dan'l, don't ye," cried Mrs. Gummidge, fervently. "Take me long with you, Dan'l, take me long with you and Emily. I'll be your servant, constant and true. If there's slaves in them parts where you're going, I'll be bound to you for one, and happy, but don't ye leave me behind, Dan'l, that's a dearie dear." "My good soul," said Mr. Peggotty, shaking his head, "you don't know what a long voyage, and what a hard life 'tis." "Yes, I do, Dan'l. I can guess," cried Mrs. Gummidge. "But my parting words under this roof is, I shall go into the house and die, if I am not took. I can dig, Dan'l. I can work. I can live hard. I can be loving and patient now, more than you think, Dan'l, if you... I know how 'tis. I know you think that I am lone and lorn, but, dearie love, 'tan't so no more. I ain't sat here, so long, watching, and thinking of your trials, without some good being done me. Marser Davy, speak to him for me. I knows his ways, and Emily's, and I knows their sorrows, and can be a comfort to 'em, some odd times, and labour from a lose. Dan'l, dearie Dan'l, let me go long with you." And Mrs. Gummidge took his hand, and kissed it with a homely pathos and affection, in a homely rapture of devotion and gratitude, that he well deserved. We brought the locker out, extinguished the candle, fastened the door on the outside, and left the old boat close shut up, a dark speck in the cloudy night. Next day, when we were returning to London outside the coach, Mrs. Gummidge and her basket were on the seat behind, and Mrs. Gummidge was happy. David Copperfield, Chapter 52. I assisted an explosion when the time Mr. Micawber had appointed so mysteriously was within 24 hours of being come. My aunt and I consulted how we should proceed, for my aunt was very unwilling to leave Dora. Ah! How easily I carried Dora up and down stairs, now! We were disposed, notwithstanding Mr. Micawber's stipulation for my aunt's attendance, to arrange that she should stay at home, and be represented by Mr. Dick and me. Bad boy, if my aunt remained behind, on any pretence, I won't speak to you, said Dora, shaking her curls at my aunt. I'll be disagreeable. I'll make Jip bark at you all day. I shall be sure that you really are a cross old thing, if you don't go. Tut, Blossom, laughed my aunt. You know you can't do without me. Yes, I can, said Dora. You are no use to me at all. You never run up and down stairs for me, all day long. You never sit and tell me stories about Dodie, when his shoes were worn out, and he was covered with dust. Oh, what a poor little mite of a fellow. You never do anything at all to please me, do you, dear? Dora made haste to kiss my aunt, and say, Yes, you do. I'm only joking. Lest my aunt should think she really meant it, but, Aunt, said Dora, coaxingly, now listen. You must go. I shall tease you, till you let me have my own way about it. I shall lead my naughty boy such a life, if he don't make you go. I shall make myself so disagreeable, and so will Jip. You'll wish you had gone, like a good thing, for ever and ever so long, if you don't go. Besides, said Dora, putting back her hair, and looking wonderingly at my aunt and me, why shouldn't you both go? I am not very ill indeed. Am I? Why, what a question, cried my aunt. What a fancy, said I. Yes. I know I am a silly little thing, shall not believe you, and then I shall cry. I saw, in my aunt's face, that she began to give way now, and Dora brightened again, as she saw it too. You'll come back with so much to tell me, that it'll take at least a week to make me understand, said Dora. Because I know I shan't understand, for a length of time, if there's any business in it. And there's sure to be some business in it. If there's anything to add up, besides, I don't know when I shall make it out, and my bad boy will look so miserable all the time. There. Now you'll go, won't you? You'll only be gone one night, and Jip will take care of me while you are gone. Dodie will carry me upstairs before you go, and I won't come down again till you come back, and you shall take Agnes a dreadfully scolding letter from me, because she has never been to see us. We agreed, without any more consultation, that we would both go, and that Dora was a little impostor, who feigned to be rather unwell, because she liked to be petted. She was greatly pleased, and very merry, and we four, that is to say, my aunt, Mr. Dick, Traddles, and I, went down to Canterbury by the Dover mail that night to the hotel where Mr. Micawber had requested us to await him, which we got into, with some trouble. In the middle of the night, I found a letter, importing that he would appear in the morning punctually at home. Smelt as if they had been steeped, for ages, in a solution of soup and stables. Early in the morning, I sauntered through the dear old tranquil streets, and again mingled with the shadows of the venerable gateways and churches. The rooks were sailing about the cathedral towers, and the towers themselves, overlooking many a long unaltered mile of the rich country and its pleasant streams, were cutting the bright morning air, as if there were no such thing as change on earth. Yet the bells, when they sounded, told me sorrowfully of change in everything, told me of their own age, and my pretty Dora's youth, and of the many, never old, who had lived and loved and died, while the reverberations of the bells had hummed through the rusty armor of the Black Prince hanging up within, and, motes upon the deep of time, had lost themselves in air, as circles do in water. Did I looked at the old house from the corner of the street, but did not go nearer to it, lest, being observed, I might unwittingly do any harm to the design I had come to aid. The early sun was striking edgewise on its gables and lattice windows, touching them with gold, and some beams of its old piece seemed to touch my heart. That I strolled into the country for an hour or so, and then returned by the main street, which in the interval had shaken off its last night's sleep. Among those who were nursing the baby, and appeared to be a benignant member of society, that we all became very anxious and impatient, when we sat down to breakfast. As it approached nearer and nearer to 9:30 o'clock, our restless expectation of Mr. Micawber increased. At last we made no more pretense of attending to the meal, which, except with Mr. Dick, had been a mere form from the first, but my aunt walked up and down the room. Traddles sat upon the sofa affecting to read the paper with his eyes on the ceiling, and I looked out of the window to give early notice of Mr. Micawber's coming. Nor had I long to watch, for, at the first chime of the half-hour, he appeared in the street. "Here he is," said I, "and not in his legal attire." My aunt tied the strings of her bonnet, she had come down to breakfast in it, and put on her shawl, as if she were ready for anything that was resolute and uncompromising. Traddles buttoned his coat with a determined air. Mr. Dick, disturbed by these formidable appearances, but feeling it necessary to imitate them, pulled his hat, with both hands, as firmly over his ears as he possibly could, and instantly took it off again, to welcome Mr. Micawber. "Gentlemen, and madam," said Mr. Micawber, "good morning." "My dear sir," to Mr. Dick, who shook hands with him violently, "you are extremely good." "Have you breakfasted?" said Mr. Dick. Dixon, have long been strangers. Mr. Dixon was so well pleased with his new name, and appeared to think it so obliging in Mr. Micawber to confer it upon him, that he shook hands with him again, and laughed rather childishly. "Dick," said my aunt, "attention." Mr. Dick recovered himself, with a blush. "Now, sir," said my aunt to Mr. Micawber, as she put on her gloves, "we are ready for Mount Vesuvius, or anything else, as soon as you please." "Madam," returned Mr. Micawber, "I trust you will shortly witness an eruption. Mr. Traddles, I have your permission, I believe, to mention here that we have been in communication together." "It is undoubtedly the fact, Copperfield," said Traddles, to whom I looked in surprise. "Mr. Micawber has consulted me in reference to what he has in contemplation, and I have advised him to the best of my judgment." "Unless I deceive myself, Mr. Traddles," pursued Mr. Micawber, "what I contemplate is a disclosure of an important nature." "Highly so," said Traddles. "Perhaps, under such circumstances, madam and gentlemen," said Mr. Micawber, "you will do me the favor to submit yourselves, for the moment, to the direction of one who, however unworthy to be regarded in any other light but as a waif and stray upon the shore of human nature, is still your fellowman, though crushed out of his original form by individual errors. What you please." "Mr. Copperfield," returned Mr. Micawber, "your confidence is not, at the existing juncture, ill bestowed. I would beg to be allowed a start of 5 minutes by the clock, and then to receive the present company, inquiring for Miss Wickfield, at the office of Wickfield and Heap, whose stipendiary I am." My aunt and I looked at Traddles, who nodded his approval. "I have no more," observed Mr. Micawber, "to say at present." With which, to my infinite surprise, he included us all in a comprehensive bow, and disappeared. His manner being extremely distant, and his face extremely pale, Traddles only smiled, and shook his head, with his hair standing upright on the top of it, when I looked to him for an explanation, so I took out my watch, and, as a last resource, counted off the 5 minutes. My aunt, with her own watch in her hand, did the like. When the time was expired, Traddles gave her his arm, and we all went out together to the old house. Without saying one word on the way, we found Mr. Micawber at his desk, in the turret office on the ground floor, either writing, or pretending to write, hard. The large office ruler was stuck into his waistcoat, and was not so well concealed but that a foot or more of that instrument protruded from his bosom, like a new kind of shirt frilled. As it appeared to me that I was expected to speak, I said aloud, "How do you do?" said I. "Mr. Wickfield is unwell in bed, sir, of a rheumatic fever," he returned. "But Miss Wickfield, I have no doubt, will be happy to see old friends. Will you walk in, sir?" He preceded us to the dining room, the first room I had entered in that house, and flinging open the door of Mr. Wickfield's former office, said, in a sonorous voice, "Miss Trotwood, Mr. David Copperfield, Mr. Thomas Traddles, and Mr. Dickson." I had not seen Uriah Heep since the time of the blow. Our visit astonished him, evidently, not the less, I dare say, because it astonished ourselves. He did not gather his eyebrows together, for he had none worth mentioning, but he frowned to that degree that he almost closed his small eyes, while the hurried raising of his grisly hand to his chin betrayed some trepidation or surprise. This was only when we were in the act of entering his room, and when I caught a glance at him over my aunt's shoulder. A moment afterwards, he was as fawning and as humble as ever. "Well, I am sure," he said, "this is indeed an unexpected pleasure. To have, as I may say, all friends round St. Paul's at once, is a treat and looked for. Mr. Copperfield, I hope I see you well, and, if I may humbly express myself so, friendly towards them as is ever your friends, whether or not. Mrs. Copperfield, sir, I hope she's getting on. We have been made, what else to do? Things are changed in this office, Miss Trotwood, since I was an humble clerk, and held your pony, ain't they?" said Uriah, with his sickliest smile. "But I am not changed, Miss Trotwood." "Well, sir," returned my aunt, "to tell you the truth, I think you are pretty constant to the promise of your youth, if that's any satisfaction to you." "Thank you, Miss Trotwood," said Uriah, writhing in his ungainly manner, "for your good opinion. Micawber, tell em to let Miss Agnes know, and mother. Mother will be quite in a state, when she sees the present company," said Uriah, setting chairs. "You are not busy, Mr. Heep?" said Traddles, whose eye the cunning red eye accidentally caught, as it at once scrutinized and evaded us. "No, Mr. Traddles," replied Uriah, resuming his official seat, and squeezing his bony hands, laid palm to palm between his bony knees. "Not so much so as I could wish. But lawyers, sharks, and leeches are not easily satisfied, you know. Not but what myself and Micawber have our hands pretty full, in general, on account of Mr. Wickfield's being hardly fit for any occupation, sir. But it's a pleasure as well as a duty, I am sure, to work for him. You've not been intimate with Mr. Wickfield, I think, Mr. Traddles? I believe I've only had the honour of seeing you once myself." "No, which made Uriah look at the speaker again, with a very sinister and suspicious expression. But, seeing only Traddles, with his good-natured face, simple manner, and hair on end, he dismissed it as he replied, with a jerk of his whole body, but especially his throat, "I am sorry for that, Mr. Traddles. You would have admired him as much as we all do. His little failings would only have endeared him to you the more. But if you would like to hear my fellow partner eloquently spoken of, I should refer you to Copperfield. The family is a subject is very strong upon, if you never heard him. I was prevented from disclaiming the compliment, if I should have done so, in any case, by the entrance of Agnes, now ushered in by Mr. Micawber. She was not quite so self-possessed as usual, I thought, and had evidently undergone anxiety and fatigue. But her earnest cordiality, and her quiet beauty, shone with the gentler lustre for it. I saw Uriah watch her while she greeted us, and he reminded me of an ugly and rebellious genie watching a good spirit. In the meanwhile, some slight sign passed between Mr. Micawber and Traddles, unobserved except by me, went out. "Don't wait, Micawber," said Uriah. Mr. Micawber, with his hand upon the ruler in his breast, stood erect before the door, most unmistakably contemplating one of his fellowmen, and that man his employer. Micawber, "Then why do you wait?" said Uriah. "Because I, in short, choose," replied Mr. Micawber, with a burst. Uriah's cheeks lost colour, and an unwholesome paleness, still faintly tinged by his pervading red, overspread them. He looked at Mr. Micawber attentively, with his whole face breathing short and quick in every feature. "You are a dissipated fellow, as all the world knows," he said, with an effort at a smile, "and I am afraid you'll oblige me to get rid of you. Go along. I'll talk to you presently." "If there is a scoundrel on this earth," said Mr. Micawber, suddenly breaking out again with the utmost vehemence, "with whom I have already talked too much, that scoundrel's name is Heap." Uriah fell back, as if he had been struck or stung. Looking slowly round upon us with the darkest and wickedest expression that his face could wear, he said, in a lower voice, "Aho! This is a conspiracy. You have met here by appointment. You are playing booty with my clerk, are you, Copperfield? Now, take care. You'll make nothing of this. We understand each other, you and me. There's no love between us. You were always a puppy with a proud stomach, from your first coming here. And you envy me my rise, do you? None of your plots against me. I'll counterplot you. Micawber, you be off. I'll talk to you presently." Is brought to bay. Deal with him as he deserves. "You are a precious set of people, ain't you?" said Uriah, in the same low voice, and breaking out into a clammy heat, which he wiped from his forehead, with his long lean hand, "to buy over my clerk, who is the very scum of society, as you yourself were, Copperfield, you know it, before anyone had charity on you, to defame me with his lies? Miss Trotwood, you had better stop this, or I'll stop your husband shorter than will be pleasant to you. I won't know your story professionally, for nothing, old lady. Miss Wickfield, if you have any love for your father, you had better not join that gang. I'll ruin him, if you do. Now, come. I have got some of you under the harrow. Think twice, before it goes over you. Think twice, you, Micawber, if you don't want to be crushed. I recommend you to take yourself off, and be talked to presently, you fool, while there's time to retreat. Where's mother?" he said, suddenly appearing to notice, with alarm, the absence of Traddles, and pulling down the bell rope. "Fine doings in a person's own house." "Mrs. Heap is here, sir," said Traddles, returning with that worthy mother of a worthy son. "I have taken the liberty of making myself known to her." "Who are you to make yourself known?" retorted Uriah. "And what do you want here?" "I am the aid in all matters." "The old ass has drunk himself into a state of dotage," said Uriah, turning uglier than before, "and it has been got from him by fraud." "Something has been got from him by fraud," "I know," returned Traddles quietly. "And so do you, Mr. Heap. We will refer that question, if you please, to Mr. Micawber." "Hughie," Mrs. Heap began, with an anxious gesture. "You hold your tongue, mother," he returned. "Least said, soonest mended." "But, my Hughie, will you hold your tongue, mother, and leave it to me?" Though I had long known that his civility was false, and all his pretences knavish and hollow, I had had no adequate conception of the extent of his hypocrisy, until I now saw him with his mask off. The suddenness with which he dropped it, when he perceived that it was useless to him, the malice, insolence, and hatred he revealed, the leer with which he exulted, even at this moment, in the evil he had done, all this time being desperate too, and at his wit's end for the means of getting the better of us, though perfectly consistent with the experience I had of him, at first took even me by surprise, who had known him so long, and dislike him so heartily. Did I say nothing of the look he conferred on me, as he stood eyeing us, one after another? For I had always understood that he hated me, and I remembered the marks of their disappointment, of the odious passions that had led him to aspire to one whose virtues he could never appreciate or care for. I was shocked by the mere thought of her having lived an hour within sight of such a man. After some rubbing of the lower part of his face, and some looking at us with those bad eyes, over his grisly fingers, he made one more address to me, half whining, and half abusive. "You think it justifiable, do you, Copperfield? You who pride yourself so much on your honor, and all the rest of it, to sneak about my place, eavesdropping with my clerk? If it had been me, I shouldn't have wondered, for I don't make myself out a gentleman, though I never was in the streets either, as you were, according to Micawber, but being you. And you're not afraid of doing this, either? You don't think at all of what I shall do, in return, or of getting yourself into trouble for conspiracy and so forth. Very well. We shall see. Mr. What's-your-name, you were going to refer some question to Micawber. There's your referee. Why don't you make him speak? He has learnt his lesson, I see." Seeing that what he said had no effect on me or any of us, he sat on the edge of his table with his hands in his pockets, and one of his splay feet twisted round the other leg, waiting doggedly for what might follow. Mr. Micawber, whose to the second, now burst forward, drew the ruler from his breast, apparently as a defensive weapon, and produced from his pocket a foolscap document, folded in the form of a large letter. Opening this packet, with his old flourish, and glancing at the contents, as if he cherished an artistic admiration of their style of composition, he began to read as follows: "Dear Miss Trotwood and gentlemen." "Bless and save the man!" exclaimed my aunt in a low voice. "He'd write letters by the ream, if it was a capital offence." Mr. Micawber, without hearing her, went on, "In appearing before you to denounce probably the most consummate villain that has ever existed." Mr. Micawber, without looking off the letter, pointed the ruler, like a ghostly truncheon, at Uriah Heep. "I ask no consideration for myself, the victim, from my cradle, of pecuniary liabilities to which I have been unable to respond. I have ever been the sport and toy of debasing circumstances. Ignominy, want, despair, and madness have, collectively or separately, been the attendants of my career." The relish with which Mr. Micawber described himself as a prey to these dismal calamities was only to be equalled by the emphasis with which he read his letter, and the kind of homage he rendered to it with a roll of his head, when he thought he had hit a sentence very hard. The bureau of the firm, nominally conducted under the appellation of Wickfield and Heap, but in reality wielded by Heap alone. Heap, and only Heap, is the mainspring of that machine. Heap, and only Heap, is the forger and the cheat. Uriah, more blue than white at these words, made a dart at the letter, as if to tear it in pieces. Mr. Micawber, with a perfect miracle of dexterity or luck, caught his advancing knuckles with the ruler, and disabled his right hand. It dropped at the wrist, as if it were broken. The blow sounded as if it had fallen on wood. "The devil take you," said Uriah, writhing in a new way with pain. "I'll be even with you." "Approach me again, you heap of infamy," gasped Mr. Micawber. "And if your head is human, I'll break it. Come on, come on." I think I never saw anything more ridiculous, I was sensible of it, even at the time, than Mr. Micawber making broadsword guards with the ruler, and crying, "Come on," while Traddles and I pushed him back into a corner, from which, as often as we got him into it, he persisted in emerging again his enemy, muttering to himself, after wringing his wounded hand for some time, slowly drew off his neckkerchief and bound it up, then held it in his other hand, and sat upon his table with his sullen face looking down. Mr. Micawber, word and uttering it with astonishing vigour, were not defined, beyond the pittance of 22 shillings and 6 per week. The rest was left contingent on the value of my professional exertions, in other and more expressive words, on the baseness of my nature, the cupidity of my motives, the poverty of my family, the general moral, or rather immoral, resemblance between myself and Heap. Need I say that it soon became necessary for me to solicit from Heap pecuniary advances towards the support of Mrs. Micawber and our blighted but rising family? Need I say that this necessity had been foreseen by Heap? That those advances were secured by IOUs and other similar acknowledgments, known to the legal institutions of this country? And that I thus became enmeshed in the web he had spun for my reception. Mr. Micawber's enjoyment of his epistolary powers, in describing this unfortunate state of things, really seemed to outweigh any pain or anxiety that the reality could have caused him. He read on. Then it was that Heap began to favour me with just so much of his confidence, as was necessary to the discharge of his infernal business. Then it was that I began, if I may so Shakespeareanly express myself, to dwindle, peak, and pine. I found that my services were constantly called into requisition for the falsification of business, and every possible way, yet that all this while, the ruffian, Heap, was professing unbounded gratitude to, and unbounded friendship for, that much abused gentleman. This was bad enough, but, as the philosophic Dane observes, with that universal applicability which distinguishes the illustrious ornament of the Elizabethan era, worse remains behind. Mr. Micawber was so very much struck by this happy rounding off with a quotation, that he indulged himself, and us, with a second reading of the sentence, under pretence of having lost his place. It is not my intention, he continued reading on, to enter on a detailed list, within the compass of the present epistle, though it is ready elsewhere, of the various malpractices of a minor nature, affecting the individual whom I have denominated Mr. W., to which I have been a tacitly consenting party. My object, when the contest within myself between stipend and no stipend, baker and no baker, existence and non-existence, ceased, was to take advantage of my opportunities to discover and expose the major malpractices committed, to that gentleman's grievous wrong and injury, by Heap, stimulated by the silent monitor within, and by a no less touching and appealing monitor without, to whom I will briefly refer as Miss W. I entered on a not unlaborious task of clandestine investigation, protracted, were from an Act of Parliament, and appeared majestically refreshed by the sound of the words, "My charges against Heap." He read on, glancing at him, and drawing the ruler into a convenient position under his left arm, in case of need. are as follows. We all held our breath, I think. I am sure Uriah held his first, said Mr. Micawber, when Mr. W.'s faculties and memory for business became, through causes into which it is not necessary or expedient for me to enter, weakened and confused, Heap designedly perplexed and complicated the whole of the official transactions. When Mr. W. was least fit to enter on business, Heap was always at hand to force him to enter on it. He obtained Mr. W.'s signature under such circumstances to documents of importance, representing them to be other documents of no importance. He induced Mr. W. to empower him to draw out, thus, one particular sum of trust money, amounting to 12,614, 2 and 9, and employed it to meet pretended business charges and deficiencies which were either already provided for, or had never really existed. He gave this proceeding, throughout, the appearance of having originated in Mr. W.'s own dishonest intention, and of having been accomplished by Mr. W.'s own dishonest act, and has used it, ever since, to torture and constrain him. You shall prove this, you Copperfield. After him, said Mr. Micawber, breaking off from the letter. Will you? The fool himself, and lives there now, said Uriah, disdainfully. Ask Heap if he ever kept a pocket-book in that house, said Mr. Micawber. Will you? I saw Uriah's lank hand stop, involuntarily, in the scraping of his chin. Or ask him, said Mr. Micawber, if he ever burnt one there. If he says yes, and asks you where the ashes are, refer him to Wilkins Micawber, and he will hear of something not at all to his advantage. The triumphant flourish with which Mr. Micawber delivered himself of these words had a powerful effect in alarming the mother, who cried out, in much agitation, Hughie, Hughie, be humble, and make terms, my dear. Mother, he retorted, will you keep quiet? You're in a fright, and don't know what you say or mean. Humble, he repeated, looking at me, with a snarl. I've humbled some of 'em for a pretty long time back, humble as I was. Mr. Micawber, genteelly adjusting his chin in his cravat, presently proceeded with his composition. Second, Heap has, on several occasions, to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief. But that won't do, muttered Uriah, relieved. Mother, you keep quiet. We will endeavor to provide something that will do, and do for you finally, sir, very shortly, replied Mr. Micawber. Second, Heap has, of Mr. W., and has distinctly done so in one instance, capable of proof by me, to wit, in manner following, that is to say, again, Mr. Micawber had a relish in this formal piling up of words, which, however ludicrously displayed in his case, was, I must say, not at all peculiar to him. I have observed it, in the course of my life, in numbers of men. It seems to me to be a general rule. In the taking of legal oaths, for instance, deponents seem to enjoy themselves mightily when they come to several good words in succession, for the expression of one idea, as, that they utterly detest, abominate, and abjure, or so forth, and the old anathemas were made relishing on the same principle. We talk about the tyranny of words, but we like to tyrannize over them too. We are fond of having a large superfluous establishment of words to wait upon us on great occasions. We think it looks important, and sounds well. As we are not particular about the meaning of our liveries on state occasions, if they be but fine and numerous enough, so, the meaning or necessity of our words is a secondary consideration, if there be but a great parade of them. And as individuals get into trouble by making too great a show of liveries, or as slaves when they are too numerous rise against their masters, so I think I could mention a nation that has got into many great difficulties, to wit, in manner following, that is to say, Mr. W being infirm, and it being within the bounds of probability that his decease might lead to some discoveries, and to the downfall of Heap's power over the W family, as I, Wilkins Micawber, the undersigned, assume, unless the filial affection of his daughter could be secretly influenced from allowing any investigation of the partnership affairs to be ever made, the said Heap deemed it expedient to have a bond ready by him, as from Mr. W, for the before-mentioned sum of 12/6, 14, 2, and 9, with interest, stated therein to have been advanced by Heap to Mr. W to save Mr. W from dishonor, though really the sum was never advanced by him, and has long been replaced. The signatures to this instrument purporting to be executed by Mr. W, and attested by Wilkins Micawber, are forgeries by Heap. I have, in my possession, in his hand and pocketbook, several similar imitations of Mr. W.'s signature, here and there defaced by fire, but legible to anyone. I never attested any such document, and I have the document itself in my possession. Uriah Heap, with a start, took out of his pocket a bunch of keys, and opened a certain drawer, then suddenly bethought himself of what he was about, and turned again towards us, without looking in it, and I have this was written, but have since relinquished it to Mr. Traddles. It is quite true, assented Traddles. Hughie, cried the mother, be humble and make terms. I know my son will be humble, gentlemen, if you'll give him time to think. Mr. Copperfield, I'm sure you know that he was always very humble, sir. It was singular to see how the mother still held to the old trick, when the son had abandoned it as useless. Mother, he said, with an impatient bite at the handkerchief in which his hand was wrapped, you had better take and fire a loaded gun at me. But I love you, Hughie, cried Mrs. Heap. And I have no doubt she did, or that he loved her, however strange it may appear, though, to be sure, they were a congenial couple. And I can't bear to hear you provoking the gentleman, and endangering of yourself more. I told the gentleman at first, when he told me upstairs it was come to light, that I would answer for your being humble, and making amends. Oh, see how humble I am, gentlemen, and don't mind him. Why, there's Copperfield, mother, he angrily retorted, pointing his lean finger at me, against whom all his animosity was levelled, as the prime mover in the discovery, and I did not undeceive him. There's Copperfield, would have given you £100 to say less than you've blurted out. I can't help it, Hughie, cried his mother. I can't. The handkerchief, and then said to me with a scowl, what more have you got to bring forward? If anything, go on with it. What do you look at me for? Mr. Micawber promptly resumed his letter, glad to revert to a performance with which he was so highly satisfied. Third, and last, I am now in a condition to show, by Heap's false books, and Heap's real memoranda, beginning with the partially destroyed pocket-book, which I was unable to comprehend, at the time of its accidental discovery by Mrs. Micawber, on our taking possession of our present abode, in the locker or bin devoted to the reception of the ashes calcined on our domestic hearth, that the weaknesses, the faults, the very virtues, the parental affections, and the sense of honor, of the unhappy Mr. W. have been for years acted on by, and warped to the base purposes of, Heap. That Mr. W. has been for years deluded and plundered, in every conceivable manner, to the pecuniary aggrandizement of the avaricious, false, and grasping, Heap. That the engrossing object of, Heap, was, next again, to subdue Mr. and Miss W. Of his ulterior views in reference to the latter I say nothing, entirely to himself. That his last act, completed but a few months since, was to induce Mr. W. to execute a relinquishment of his share in the partnership, and even a bill of sale. That these measures, beginning with alarming and falsified accounts of the estate of which Mr. W. is the receiver, at a period when Mr. W. had launched into imprudent and ill-judged speculations, and may not have had the money, for which he was morally and legally responsible, in hand, going on with pretended borrowings of money at enormous interest, really coming from heap, and by heap, fraudulently obtained or withheld from Mr. W. himself, on pretense of such speculations or otherwise, perpetuated by a miscellaneous catalogue of unscrupulous chicaneries, gradually thickened, until the unhappy Mr. W. could see no world beyond. Bankrupt, as he believed, alike in circumstances, in all other hope, and in honour, his sole reliance was upon the monster in the garb of man. Mr. Micawber made a good deal of this, as a new turn of expression, who, by making himself necessary to him, had achieved his destruction. All this I undertake to show. Probably much more. I whispered a few words to Agnes, who was weeping, half joyfully, half sorrowfully, at my side, and there was a movement among us, as if Mr. Micawber had finished. He said, with exceeding gravity, "Pardon me," and proceeded, with a mixture of the lowest spirits and the most intense enjoyment, to the peroration of his letter. I have now concluded. Encumbrance. That is soon done. It may be reasonably inferred that our baby will first expire of inanition, as being the frailest member of our circle, and that our twins will follow next in order. So be it. For myself, my Canterbury pilgrimage has done much. Imprisonment on civil process, and want, will soon do more. I trust that the labour and hazard of an investigation, of which the smallest results have been slowly pieced together, in the pressure of arduous avocations, under grinding penurious apprehensions, at rise of morn, at dewy eve, in the shadows of night, under the watchful eye of one whom it was superfluous to call demon, combined with the struggle of parental poverty to turn it, when completed, to the right account, may be as the sprinkling of a few drops of sweet water on my funeral pyre. I ask no more. Let it be, in justice, merely said of me, as of a gallant and eminent naval hero, with whom I have no pretensions to cope, that what I have done, I did, in despite of mercenary and selfish objects, for England, home, and beauty remaining always, etc., etc., Wilkins Micawber. Much affected, but still intensely enjoying himself, Mr. Micawber folded up his letter, and handed it with a bow to my aunt, as something she might like to keep. There was, as I had noticed on my first visit long ago, an iron safe in the room, open. It was empty. "Where are the books?" he cried, with a frightful face. "Some thief has stolen the books." Mr. Micawber tapped himself with the ruler. "I did, when I got the key from you as usual, but a little earlier, and opened it this morning." "Don't be uneasy," said Traddles. "They have come into my possession. I will take care of them, under the authority I mentioned." "You receive stolen goods, do you?" cried Uriah. "Under such circumstances," answered Traddles, "yes." What was my astonishment when I beheld my aunt, who had been profoundly quiet and attentive, make a dart at Uriah Heep, and seize him by the collar with both hands. "You know what I want," said my aunt. "A strait waistcoat," said he. "No." "My property," returned my aunt. "Agnes, my dear, as long as I believed it had been really made away with by your father, I wouldn't, and, my dear, I didn't, even to Trot, as he knows, breathe a syllable of its having been placed here for investment. But, now I know this fellow's answerable for it, and I'll have it. Trot, come and take it away from him." Whether my aunt supposed, for the moment, that he kept her property in his neckerchief. I am sure I don't know, but she certainly pulled at it as if she thought so. I hastened to put myself between them, and to assure her that we would all take care that he should had done, though I cannot say as much for her bonnet, and resumed her seat composedly. During the last few minutes, Mrs. Heep had been clamouring to her son to be humble, and had been going down on her knees to all of us in succession, and making the wildest promises. Her son sat her down in his chair, and, standing sulkily by her, holding her arm with his hand, but not rudely, said to me, with a ferocious look, "What do you want done?" "I will tell you what must be done," said Traddles. "Has that Copperfield no tongue?" muttered Uriah. "I would do a good deal for you if you could tell me, without lying, that somebody had cut it out." "My Uriah means to be humble," cried his mother. "Don't mind what he says, good gentleman." "What must be done," said Traddles, "is this. First, the deed of relinquishment, that we have heard of, must be given over to me now, here." "Suppose I haven't got it," he interrupted. "But you have," said Traddles. "Therefore, you know, we won't suppose so." And I cannot help avowing that this was the first occasion on which I really did justice to the clear head, and the plain, patient, practical good sense, of my old schoolfellow. "Then," said Traddles, "you must prepare to disgorge all that your rapacity has become possessed of, and to make restoration to the last farthing. All the partnership books and papers must remain in our possession." "Don't know that," said Uriah. "I must have time to think about that." "Certainly," replied Traddles. "But, in the meanwhile, and until everything is done to our satisfaction, we shall maintain possession of these things, and beg you, in short, compel you, to keep to your own room, and hold no communication with anyone." "I won't do it," said Uriah, with an oath. "Maidstone jail is a safer place of detention," observed Traddles, "and though the law may be longer in writing us, and may not be able to write us so completely as you can, there is no doubt of its punishing you. Dear me, you know that quite as well as I. Copperfield, will you go round to the Guildhall, and bring a couple of officers?" Here, Mrs. Heep broke out again, crying on her knees to Agnes to interfere in their behalf, exclaiming that he was very humble, and it was all true, and if he didn't do what we wanted, she would, and much more to the same purpose, being half frantic with fears for her darling. To inquire what he might have done, if he had had any boldness, would be like inquiring what a mongrel cur might do, if it had the spirit of a tiger. He was a coward, from head to foot, and showed his dastardly nature through his sullenness and mortification, as much as at any time of his mean life. "Stop," he growled to me, and wiped his hot face with his hand. "Mother, hold your noise." Well, let her, and understanding it, Mr. Dick accompanied her as a shepherd's dog might accompany a sheep. But Mrs. Heep gave him little trouble, for she not only returned with the deed, but with the box in which it was, where we found a banker's book and some other papers that were afterwards serviceable. "Good," said Traddles, when this was brought. "Now, Mr. Heep, you can retire to think, particularly observing, if you please, that I declare to you, on the part of all present, that there is only one thing to be done, that it is what I have explained, and that it must be done without delay." Uriah, without lifting his eyes from the ground, shuffled across the room with his hand to his chin, and pausing at the door, said, "Copperfield, I have always hated you. You've always been an upstart, and you've always been against me." "As I think I told you once before," said I, "it is you who have been, in your greed and cunning, against all the world. It may be profitable to you to reflect, in future, that there never were greed and cunning in the world yet, that did not do too much, and overreach themselves. It is as certain as death." or as certain as they used to teach at school, the same school where I picked up so much humbleness, from 9 o'clock to 11, that labor was a curse, and from 11 o'clock to 1, that it was a blessing and a cheerfulness, and a down. I shouldn't have got round my gentleman fellow partner without it, I think. Micawber, you old bully, I'll pay you. Mr. Micawber, supremely defiant of him and his extended finger, and making a great deal of his chest until he had slunk out at the door, then addressed himself to me, and proffered me the satisfaction of witnessing the re-establishment of mutual confidence between himself and Mrs. Micawber. After which, he invited the company generally to the contemplation of that affecting spectacle. The veil that has long been interposed between Mrs. Micawber and myself is now withdrawn, said Mr. Micawber, and my children and the author of their being can once more come in contact on equal terms. As we were all very grateful to him, and all desirous to show that we were, as well as the hurry and disorder of our spirits would permit, I dare say we should all have gone, but that it was necessary for Agnes to return to her father, as yet unable to bear more than the dawn of hope, and for someone else to hold Uriah in safe keeping. So, Traddles remained for the latter purpose, to be presently relieved by Mr. Dick, and Mr. Dick, my aunt, and I, went home with Mr. Micawber. As I parted hurriedly from the dear girl to whom I owed so much, and thought from what she had been saved, perhaps, that morning, far off, and as the street door opened into the sitting-room, and he bolted in with a precipitation quite his own, we found ourselves at once in the bosom of the family. Mr. Micawber exclaiming, "Emma, my life," rushed into Mrs. Micawber's arms. Mrs. Micawber shrieked, and folded Mr. Micawber in her embrace. Miss Micawber, nursing the unconscious stranger of Mrs. Micawber's last letter to me, was sensibly affected. The stranger leaped. The twins testified their joy by several inconvenient but innocent demonstrations. Master Micawber, whose disposition appeared to have been soured by early disappointment, and whose aspect had become morose, yielded to his better feelings, and blubbered. "Emma," said Mr. Micawber, "the cloud is passed from my mind. Mutual confidence, so long preserved between us once, is restored, to know no further interruption. Now, welcome poverty," cried Mr. Micawber, shedding tears. "Welcome misery, welcome houselessness, welcome hunger, rags, tempest, and beggary. Mutual confidence will sustain us to the end." With these expressions, Mr. Micawber placed Mrs. Micawber in a chair, and embraced the family all round, welcoming a variety of bleak prospects, which appeared, to the best of my judgment, to be anything but welcome to them, and calling upon them to come out into Canterbury and sing a chorus. Chorus could be considered complete, was to recover her. This my aunt and Mr. Micawber did, and then my aunt was introduced, and Mrs. Micawber recognized me. "Excuse me, dear Mr. Copperfield," said the poor lady, giving me her hand, "but I am not strong, and the removal of the late misunderstanding between Mr. Micawber and myself was at first too much for me." "Is this all your family?" said my aunt. "There are no more at present," returned Mrs. Micawber. "Good gracious, I didn't mean that," said my aunt. "I mean, are all these yours?" "Madam," replied Mr. Micawber, "it is a true bill." "And that eldest young gentleman, now," said my aunt, musing, "what has he been brought up to?" "It was my hope when I came here," said Mr. Micawber, "to have got Wilkins into the church, or perhaps I shall express my meaning more strictly, if I say the choir. But there was no vacancy for a tenor in the venerable pile for which this city is so justly eminent, and he has, in short, he has contracted a habit of singing in public houses, rather than in sacred edifices." "But he means well," said Mrs. Micawber, tenderly. "I dare say, my love," rejoined Mr. Micawber, "that he means particularly well, but I have not yet found that he carries out his meaning in any given direction whatsoever." Master Micawber's moroseness of aspect returned born a bird. Whether he could go into the next street and open a chemist shop, whether he could rush to the next assizes and proclaim himself a lawyer, whether he could come out by force at the opera and succeed by violence, whether he could do anything without being brought up to something. My aunt mused a little while, and then said, "Mr. Micawber, I wonder you have never turned your thoughts to emigration." "Madam," returned Mr. Micawber, "it was the dream of my youth, and the fallacious aspiration of my riper years." I am thoroughly persuaded, by the by, that he had never thought of it in his life. "Aye," said my aunt, with a glance at me. "Why, what a thing it would be for yourselves and your family, Mr. and Mrs. Micawber, if you were to emigrate now." "Capital, madam, capital," urged Mr. Micawber, gloomily. "That is the principal, I may say the only difficulty, my dear Mr. Copperfield," assented his wife. "Capital," cried my aunt. "But you are doing us a great service, have done us a great service, I may say, for surely much will come out of the fire, and what could we do for you that would be half so good as to find the capital?" "I could not receive it as a gift," said Mr. Micawber, full of fire and animation, "but if a sufficient sum could be advanced, say at 5% interest, per annum, upon my personal liability, say my be, on your own terms," returned my aunt, "if you say the word. Think of this now, both of you. Here are some people David knows, going out to Australia shortly. If you decide to go, why shouldn't you go in the same ship? You may help each other. Think of this now, Mr. and Mrs. Micawber. Take your time, and weigh it well." "There is but one question, my dear, I could wish to ask," said Mrs. Micawber. "The climate, I believe, is healthy." "Finest in the world," said my aunt. "Just so," returned Mrs. Micawber. "Then my question arises. Now, are the circumstances of the country such that a man of Mr. Micawber's abilities would have a fair chance of rising in the social scale? I will not say, at present, might he aspire to be governor, or anything of that sort, but would there be a reasonable opening for his talents to develop themselves, that would be amply sufficient, and find their own expansion?" "No better opening anywhere," said my aunt, "for a man who conducts himself well, and is industrious." "For a man who conducts himself well," repeated Mrs. Micawber, with her clearest business manner, "and is industrious. Precisely. It is evident to me that Australia is the legitimate sphere of action for Mr. Micawber." "I entertain the conviction, my dear madam," said Mr. Micawber, "that it is, under existing circumstances, speaking, and though consideration is due to the kindness of your proposal, I assure you that is a mere matter of form." Shall I ever forget how, in a moment, he was the most sanguine of men, looking on to fortune, or how Mrs. Micawber presently discoursed about the habits of the kangaroo? Shall I ever recall that street of Canterbury on a market day, without recalling him, as he walked back with us, expressing, in the hardy roving manner he assumed, the unsettled habits of a temporary sojourner in the land, and looking at the bullocks, as they came by, with the eye of an Australian farmer? David Copperfield, Chapter 53. Another retrospect. I must pause yet once again. Oh, my child wife, there is a figure in the moving crowd before my memory, quiet and still, saying in its innocent love and childish beauty, "Stop to think of me, turn to look upon the little blossom, as it flutters to the ground." I do. All else grows dim, and fades away. I am again with Dora, in our cottage. I do not know how long she has been ill. I am so used to it in feeling that I cannot count the time. It is not really long, in weeks or months, but, in my usage and experience, it is a weary, weary while. They have left off telling me to wait a few days more. I have begun to fear, remotely, that the day may never shine, when I shall see my child, enliven him and make him younger, but he mopes, and his sight is weak, and his limbs are feeble, and my aunt is sorry that he objects to her no more, but creeps near her as he lies on Dora's bed. She's sitting at the bedside, and mildly licks her hand. Dora lies smiling on us, and is beautiful, and utters no hasty or complaining word. She says that we are very good to her, that her dear old careful boy is tiring himself out. She knows that my aunt has no sleep, yet is always wakeful, active, and kind. Sometimes, the little bird-like ladies come to see her, and then we talk about our wedding day, and all that happy time. What a strange rest and pause in my life there seems to be, and in all life, within doors and without, when I sit in the quiet, shaded, orderly room, with the blue eyes of my child wife turned towards me, and her little fingers twining round my hand. Many and many an hour I sit thus, but, of all those times, 3 times come the freshest on my mind that I tears morning, and Dora, made so trim by my aunt's hands, shows me how her pretty hair will curl upon the pillow yet, and how long and bright it is, and how she likes to have it loosely gathered in that net she wears. Not that I am vain of it, now, you mocking boy, she says, when I smile, but because you used to say you thought it so beautiful, and because, when you were, Dodie, when I gave you one. That was on the day when you were painting the flowers I had given you, Dora, and when I told you how much in love I was. Ah, but I didn't like to tell you, says Dora, then, how I had cried over them, because I believed you really like me. When I can run about again as I used to do, Dodie, let us go and see those places where we were such a silly couple, shall we? And take some of the old walks? And not forget poor Papa. Yes, we will, and have some happy days. So you must make haste to get well, my dear. Oh, I shall soon do that. I am so much better, you don't know. It is evening, and I sit in the same chair, by the same bed, with the same face turned towards me. We have been silent, and there is a smile upon her face. I have ceased to carry my light burden up and down stairs now. She lies here all the day, Dodie. My dear Dora. You won't think what I am going to say unreasonable, after what you told me, such a little while ago, of Mr. Wickfield's not being well? I want to see Agnes. Very much I want to see her. I will write to her, my dear. Will you? Directly. What a good, kind boy. Dodie, take me on your arm. Indeed, my dear, it's not a whim. It's not a foolish fancy. I want, very much indeed, to see her. I am certain of it. I have only to tell her so, and she is sure to come. Empty chair. My empty chair. She clings to me for a little while, in silence. And you really miss me, Dodie? Looking up, and brightly smiling. Even poor, giddy, stupid me. My heart, who is there upon earth that I could miss so much? Oh, husband! I am so glad, yet so sorry. Creeping closer to me, and folding me in both her arms. She laughs and sobs, and then is quiet, and quite happy. Quite, she says. Only give Agnes my dear love, and tell her that I want very, very much to see her, and I have nothing left to wish for. Except to get well again, Dora. Ah, Dodie. Sometimes I think, You know I always was a silly little thing. That will never be. Don't say so, Dora. Dearest love, don't think so. I won't, if I can help it, Dodie. But I am very happy, though my dear boy is so lonely by himself, before his child-wife's empty chair. It is night, and I am with her still. Agnes has arrived, has been among us for a whole day and an evening. She, my aunt, and I, have sat with Dora since the morning, all together. We have not talked much, but Dora has been perfectly contented and cheerful. We are now alone. Do I know, now, that my child-wife will soon leave me? They have told me so. They have told me nothing new to my thoughts, but I am far from sure that I have taken that truth to heart. I cannot master gracious and compassionate history. I have tried to resign myself, and to console myself, and that, I hope, I may have done imperfectly. But what I cannot firmly settle in my mind is, that the end will absolutely come. I hold her hand in mine, I hold her heart in mine, I see her love for me, alive in all its strength. I cannot shut out a pale lingering shadow of belief that she will be spared. I am going to speak to you, Dodie. I am going to say something I have often thought of saying, lately. You won't mind. With a gentle look, mind, my darling. Because I don't know what you will think, or what you may have thought sometimes. Perhaps you have often thought the same. Dodie, dear, I am afraid I was too young. I lay my face upon the pillow by her, and she looks into my eyes, and speaks very softly. Gradually, as she goes on, I feel, with a stricken heart, that she is speaking of herself as past. I am afraid, dear, I was too young. I don't mean in years only, but in experience, and thoughts, and everything. I was such a silly little creature. I am afraid it would have been better, if we had only loved each other as a boy and girl, and forgotten it. I have begun to think I was not fit to be a wife. I try to stay my tears, and to reply, oh, Dora, love, as fit as I to be a husband. I don't know, with the old shake of her curls. Perhaps, very happy, my sweet Dora. I was very happy, very. But, as years went on, my dear boy would have wearied of his child-wife. She would have been less and less a companion for him. He would have been more and more sensible of what was wanting in his home. She wouldn't have improved. It is better as it is. Oh, Dora, dearest, dearest, do not speak to me so. Every word seems a reproach. No, not a syllable, she answers, kissing me. Oh, my dear, you never deserved it, and I loved you far too well to say a reproachful word to you. In earnest, it was all the merit I had, except being pretty, or you thought me so. Is it lonely, downstairs, Dodie? Very, very. Don't cry. Is my chair there? In its old place. Oh, how my poor boy cries. Hush, hush. Now, make me one promise. I want to speak to Agnes. When you go downstairs, tell Agnes so, and send her up to me. And while I speak to her, let no one come, not even Aunt. I want to speak to Agnes by herself. I want to speak to Agnes, quite alone. I promise that she shall, immediately, but I cannot leave her, for my grief. I said that it was better as it is, she whispers, as she holds me in her arms. Oh, Dodie, after more years, you never could have loved your child-wife better than you do. And, after more years, she would so have tried and disappointed you, that you might not have been able to give her the message. She disappears, leaving me alone with Jip. His Chinese house is by the fire, and he lies within it, on his bed of flannel, querulously trying to sleep. The bright moon is high and clear. As I look out on the night, my tears fall fast, and my undisciplined heart is chastened heavily. Heavily did I sit down by the fire, thinking with a blind remorse of all those secret feelings I have nourished since my marriage. I think of every little trifle between me and Dora, and feel the truth, that trifles make the sum of life. Ever rising from the sea of my remembrance, is the image of the dear child as I knew her first, graced by my young love, and by her own, with every fascination wherein such love is rich. Would it, indeed, have been better if we had loved each other as a boy and a girl, and forgotten it? Undisciplined heart, reply, how the time wears, I know not, until I am recalled by my child-wife's old companion. More restless than he was, he crawls out of his house, and looks at me, and wanders to the door, and whines to go upstairs. Not tonight, Jip. Not tonight. He comes very slowly back to me, licks my hand, and lifts his dim eyes to my face. Oh, Jip! It may be, never again. He lies down at my feet, stretches himself out as if to sleep, and with a plaintive cry, is dead. Oh, Agnes! Look, look, here! That face, darkness comes before my eyes, and, for a time, all things are blotted out of my remembrance.